this, is the holy
There's
grail.
Something different.
But I didn't realize until later it's
a little bit embarrassed when somebody asks, like, what do you lift? So I was squatting like 800, and my best bench in a shirt was like 630.
How'd you go about gaining the weight over that time?
The Ripito gallon of milk a day. And so Brian Shaw and I won our pro card at the same show. This is who's coming up, right? 6'7". I made the right choice. I went down, right?
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Matt Reynolds, the founder of Barbell Logic -- strength coach, or strength coach / founder of Barbell Logic. As we go through his timeline, it will kind of all make sense. What I want to do is I want to go back kind of through your timeline.
Sure.
We'll go through at a little greater speed than normal.
Sure.
Because what I want to try to point out is through these different phases that we've all been through and listeners have been through, you're developing mastery of your craft.
Yep.
Right. So even with the things that are outside of what the craft are, it does lead to being better at whatever that next phase is.
Yeah.
Even when you don't even know what the next phase is.
Sure.
It's like you're looking in hindsight, you can see how that groundwork kind of played out, amongst them. And you can see where you had different pivot points.
Yeah.
You could have pivoted this way, but you went this way. Yep. And you've done it in very strategic and better ways than others, because sometimes if we use just training philosophy as an example of this, you come in, you train a certain way, then you're devouring all the information. You're 14.
Yep.
Everything you can, and you're gaining an understanding of the technical practice and all this. And then there's a split, to where you become serious or don't become serious.
Yeah.
Then you become serious, then you double down on all of that. Then later on, it becomes all the fundamentals are kind of covered. Then there's another split. Then that other split is when you make this determination of, am I just going to live in this philosophy only?
Yep.
Or am I going to look outside,
Sure.
Of other philosophies to try to, even if you keep the same bias, to make that better? And that's where a lot of coaches and a lot of people that have been in the industry for a long time, either way can be right.
Yep.
But I like the other way better.
Sure.
Because then you're able to take things from other interests and then apply that into whatever the business is or the training philosophy or whatever it is. And then it becomes uniquely yours, which is
certainly
phenomenal and better. And your view, you're just not looking at like an A, B, C, D answer.
That's right.
You're available to E, F, G, and all the rest of the alphabet.
Sure.
Because of that, or the people you hang around and speak to. So your story kind of speaks to that entire thing. So we don't need to go back when you first started training. So if we go back into when you started competing, so 90s, so it's powerlifting and strongman. So what got you into competing in the first place?
Yeah, I was a painfully average athlete in high school and loved to compete, played all the sports, loved it. I am competitive to a fault, but I wasn't good enough to play anything in college. And so I needed an outlet. And my senior year of high school, started lifting, enjoyed lifting, was decent at it, better at it than I was the typical team sports. And I found an article written by you many years ago on T-Nation. And I think the first one I found was how to bench press 600 pounds on testosterone.net at the time. And then I started to devour all of everything you'd written, and then that led me to Deep Squatter and Louis.
So what did you think when you found? Because I look back at that one in hindsight.
I thought it was crazy.
I think, what was I thinking?
Right.
Like 600 pounds. Back then, and even now, that's a freaking ton of weight.
Yeah, and of course,
and most aren't benching 300.
I thought there were probably 5 guys on the planet that could bench press 400 pounds. Like that was the world. I mean, I'm from the Ozarks, man. I'm from Springfield, Missouri, Ozarks. I love the Ozarks, but that is a very sheltered area. And so, and again, the internet was so new, and now you just get so exposed to all these freaks of nature all over the internet. And that wasn't the case then. I mean, it was really just like, it was deep squatter, what you had started to do. It was Powerlifting USA. And so I really was lucky or blessed or whatever you'd call it to fall into. I really never went into the traditional bodybuilding splits or even Western periodization. I can remember reading that early article from you about the problems of Western periodization, and conjugate training looks like this. I was like, and that's all I ever did. And so my family went on vacation to Destin, Florida. I can still remember I was like 19 years old. I'd never seen the beach. Again, Missouri. I'm a son of a poor Baptist preacher, and I remember seeing the beach coming into Destin, Florida, and I thought it was sawdust because it was before you see the water. Like,
Hey guys, real quick, we realized that something ridiculous, like 80% of the people that watch the podcast don't subscribe. So subscribe to the channel and make sure to check out the description for more details on the guest, links to their pages, and give us a few days, but the show notes will be there. Or not the show notes, the timestamps. Hey, we're just rolling with this thing right now.
I'm Dan Paschalk. I'm the owner of Madtown Fitness in Madison, Wisconsin. As I progressed in powerlifting, I decided to open a gym. Did it right after I graduated college, and I was always searching around for good equipment. I was kind of stuck to the used market just because I couldn't afford new stuff, but I was always trying to pick up elite stuff. The last few years, as the gym's grown, I've finally gotten to that point where I could make that person that I called was Matt here at elitefts. We replace all of our free weights with elite stuff. We've got the combo racks, amazing stainless steel uprights, all these really awesome custom features. Not only does the elite stuff look awesome, but it really increased the durability of the equipment that we have in the gym, and just kind of like the functionality and the ease of use. It's stuff that can really hold up to heavy use. It's designed for powerlifters and for heavy lifting, but at the same time, it's stuff that the general fitness type of population can also use. It's really been a game changer for us. It's just been an awesome kind of renovation of our whole space, and it's like a whole new gym. So for the gym owners out there looking to make an awesome change within your facility, make sure you go to elitefts.com, pull up kind of the sales tab. You can send an email through there and ask for Matt. Otherwise, you can even call their customer service line and make sure they connect you to him. Matt will make sure that you get completely taken care of.
the sand starts showing up, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, is it like a sawmill? And everybody's like, that's sand. I was like, what? And the reason that's important is because the day before that, I had wasted all my parents' ink on their printer and printed every article you had ever written, every article that was online that Louis had written on Deep Squatter, everything that was, and I put them in the little page protectors, and I had this giant, 3-inch thick 3-ring binder, and I sat on the beach all week long and read about powerlifting. I read about bands and chains and combinating resistance. And so my foray into powerlifting was Westside style training. And so I just fell in love with it. And for me, it gave me that outlet. I knew I never wanted to be the guy that was going to stand on stage in a pink thong bikini and have a beauty pageant with other dudes. oil. And listen, I respect bodybuilders because the work that it takes to do that is tremendous. I just knew that wasn't me. And I love this idea. I was telling you before we started recording, like J.M. Blakely had an article in one of the very first Powerlifting USA's on the drive down. We drove down to Florida from Missouri. We stopped at a Barnes & Noble, and they had 2 Powerlifting USA's, and one was...
How long was that? Is
well,
it like 20?
Oh, no, it's probably 12 hours. Not terrible, but I mean, long enough. Like, I think we rented, we rented a minivan, but listen, man, I had all the articles, and I read them all the way down, and I read them on the beach, and I read them on... I mean, it was just like... And I felt like I had discovered this, like, secret formula for strength training. And so I just dove all in, and I read every article I could. I came back, and immediately my brother and I, younger brother, 3 years younger than me, we started powerlifting, having no idea what we were doing, never having a coach, just literally based on Powerlifting USA, your articles, all that kind of stuff.
So did you pick a meet and start training for that, or just the training first? Pretty
quick. I mean, I probably lifted for about 6 months, and then got in the back of Powerlifting USA and started seeing, like, and the first one I went to, I just watched. And so it was in middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, and drove down there. I just wanted to see it was actually in the middle of like a mall, like a mall food court. And they had it all set up, and I watched, and I was like, okay, I can do this. I'll do this. Now, I graduated high school. I was 155 pounds. I'm 6'2". I got married at 175 in 2000, and that's about the time that I discovered powerlifting right before this. So I'd put on 20 pounds. And within a year, I was like 250. And so I had put on a lot of weight. And so I started competing. I competed at 220 and did well. Ended up total elite at 220, then 242, then 275, then 308s. And did that from about 2000 or 2001 till 2005. So over a course of 4 years, took my body weight from 170 or so to low 300s. And loved it. Loved powerlifting. Got all into the geared powerlifting. It was bench shirts and squat suits, and then really sort of, I don't know that I got bored. It was just that powerlifting was just 3 lifts, and I was just like, I wanted some more variety.
How'd you go about gaining the weight over that time?
The Ripito gallon of milk a day, and I live in Missouri, and so I could go buy a gallon of raw milk for $1.75 a gallon. And so I would take a Culligan water container. So we had a beverage fridge down in my basement. We kept beer and stuff. And I cleaned out the top shelf and got a Culligan water container, a 5-gallon Culligan water container. I would fill it up every week. And so I would drink a minimum of 5 gallons of raw whole milk, which I would not suggest at this point to any of my clients.
Yeah.
So sort of certainly led to probably future health problems. But at the time, it was a great way to gain weight. And you do what you do when you're competitive. I mean, and I've talked openly about this, and like the performance enhancements came in, but even those are funny stories, because it's like, it's none of that stuff was easy to come by, and I wasn't buying stuff like that out of the back of somebody's car. It was like, I'm going to the farm supply store and buying Phenoplex. Crazy stuff. And so again, I told you before we got on this, I'm a pretty open box. I'm very transparent.
So
about
you're
this
cooking
stuff.
the shit on the stove, or were you actually doing it?
So I actually got a chemistry set and separated out.
All right, so you were doing
the glue and the binders, and did the stuff, and so I used trend before I ever used test, which is nuts.
At that point, I fall in that same time frame. Did we even know that's what it was? It's just, you had two choices, like Phenoplex and Hefferoy.
That's right. And so I was like, how do I get all the glue and binders out of this stuff?
Yeah.
And so you'd separate it and you'd run it through a coffee filter and do all the stuff. And so I'm sure it still wasn't very good for me. And so did that, got strong, got decently strong, and then started learning gear. I can remember buying my first bench press shirt. It was an Inzer double denim from you. And I could bench at the time probably 315 raw. So I was maybe 230 pounds, something like that, which again, I thought was strong. Springfield, Missouri was strong. And I can remember, and of course, at the time, I'm sure I bet you took 1 million returns for bench shirts in those early days, stuff, because nobody knew how they fit, including me. And so I'm reading articles from you and Windler and everybody, and like, it's got to be super tight, and your arms are straight out, And then I take 315 out, and it moves like 3 inches. And I was like, oh no, I bought it too tight. Well, I hadn't. It was correct. I just didn't know. And so I sent it back and got the next size up. And then pretty soon I'm like, I think I need to go back down to that lower size, because I can figure out how to make this thing touch. And so I was never super excited about geared lifting. And part of it was, there was this part of me that was a little bit embarrassed when somebody asked, like, what do you lift? So I was squatting like 800, and my best bench in a shirt was like 635. I was strong, but I wasn't anywhere near like world-class strong. But it's, so I was a low 400s raw bench presser, and I was a 635 shirted bencher. So when somebody asked me what I bench, I would say 635, but there was a little part of me in the back of my, it's just like, that's not really what you bench, you know? And so I went through all that and learned how to do the gear and all this stuff. And then I got to the point where I was just like, you know what? I would just love a little bit of a change from these 3 main lifts. I hadn't overhead pressed maybe ever, and certainly not in 10 years.
Yeah, I'm gonna cut you off real quick, because you reminded me of a story when I ordered my first bench shirt.
Yeah.
And
Which
it was
what year?
Oh God.
Probably late 80s.
Late 80s. And it might have even been sooner than that. It might have been before I was even out of high school, like mid 80s. And I got pumped up, and so I send these measurements in. My arm's like 19 and a half. And, and Ernie France himself actually called me because it didn't make sense.
Right. The size you bought for your.
And I can see on his end, he's like, man, whatever this dude's jacked is, and we're talking this through, and I didn't want to say that those weren't right, because they were, but I didn't say, they were all pumped.
Right.
It's probably like an inch and a half more than it should be. And then when I got it, it was big.
Yeah, right.
It was like
way
super big, right?
Touched easy.
And I didn't want to call and say, hey, you were right. But at the same time, I didn't even know how the shirt was supposed to, what it was supposed to be. We would just wear super tight t-shirts and kind of go that route. But your story kind of reminded me of that, because we'd have people that would do that as well, you know, back then. And then the other ones that would put it on and it's tight and then not really know, you know, from that.
That was me.
But so you're not the only one.
Yeah.
I had a lot of feelings of embarrassment, which I finally got over it. Then when I got a real shirt, I'm like, oh, wow, cool. I get 20 pounds out of this. I didn't realize years later that's nothing. But anyhow, so you get bored with it.
Yeah, I get bored with it. And at the same time, just in my own personal education. So I again, obviously the internet's exploding. Your website's becoming huge. It's like the place to go for content. And again, you got T-Mag, you got Powerlifting USA. There's still not a ton of stuff out there, but like I was consuming everything I could. And at the same time, I also discovered I got in with Glenn Penley and Ripito and that crew. And so and then from your website, I don't remember, and Louis, I started to go down the Russian trail, and it's Zatsiorski and Verkhoshansky and Sif and Bompa, and I would go down. I talked about this when I interviewed you on my podcast. Where it was like I went down to what I call the catacombs of my university, gym or university library, and got all these books. And the same feeling I had in 2000 or 2001, I had again in maybe 2003 of I've discovered this thing that no one knows about. Like the Soviets are so far ahead, and Bondarchuk, and and then Vladimir Yashurin and block training. I'm just like, these guys are decades ahead of us. And so I really was lucky that.
So when you were doing that though, I'm curious, because you have there's a conjugate background, but with that also kind of becomes a linear background as well. And then this kind of comes in, which is still linear. I mean, it's still all conjugate.
Yeah, sure.
It's still all the same. But you haven't figured that out yet. No. Right? There's more similarities than there are differences.
Yep.
And when I was going through things like that and would find that, I'd be like, oh man, this, is the holy grail.
Something different.
But I didn't realize until later it's the integration of all that.
That's exactly right.
So were you kind of like that as well?
Yes, I didn't put that all together until several years ago, and I'm sure we'll get into this on the podcast. And we developed our style of programming that we now call minimum effective dose for maximum return on investment. And we started to see like, wait, this is all on a spectrum. You start with linear, and then you move to something that is a intermediate based program that you can't just linear is just volume's the same, frequency this is the same, at least the way we did it, and we just added load, added intensity. And that doesn't work forever. We'd all squat 1,000, and then what do you do? Well, now intensity and volume have to have sort of this inverse relationship. So now, if I'm going to keep adding intensity, volume has to start coming down. At least the reps per set have to start coming down. And you realize that was the minimum effective dose step, right? At the time, I was training Westside as I knew it, which again, you guys have spoken about many times. We probably weren't doing it right, but I was training 4 days a week, and I had 2 max effort days and 2 dynamic effort days, and then hypertrophy work as repetition stuff afterwards, and that's how I trained. So I never really trained what I would say wrong in the strength world from the very beginning. I just got lucky, and I think it was just because I have this almost on a level of like a little bit Asperger's of I will go down a rabbit trail, and learn things till I have just I go nuts. And so I just read everything I could. And so I got there. So then in that same time, I'm developing a relationship with Penley and Ripito, and I don't really understand their programming. I mean, this is way before Starting Strength was written. And so I don't understand the kind of linear and then the Texas method and Bill Starr and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just like Westside conjugate, which again, I think you guys talked about, I would call concurrent more than conjugate at this point. And then and then you discover Bondarchuk and Ashurin and block training, and that's actually more conjugate. And so you start right. So the wheels are turning in my head, and I haven't got it all figured out yet at all. Not that I even still do, but you're just kind of filing it in place. And so the thing that changed my training was when I got bored. I'd say bored. I still love powerlifting and continue to do it for years afterwards. But I wanted a little break, and I moved to strongman. And the thing that strongman gave me was that every competition had different events. The events were different. The events were somewhat athletic, but they were also super heavy. And I got into it about the time Phil Pfister won, and he was the last world's strongest man, and forgive me, Phil, that wasn't that strong. Right, like something happened, and he was strong. He was. No,
I understand what you're saying.
The weights just weren't super. So like the top stone that year is like 350 pounds. And now they're loading 500-pound stones, right? Or they're deadlifting 700 for reps, and now they're deadlifting 900 for reps. And That occurred as I got into strongman. The weights just started getting ridiculous. And so, of course, the problem is you can't come up with, like, nobody has strongman equipment. So there's racks and barbells and weights for decades. But figuring out that stuff. So there was a pro strongman up in Kansas City. I called him up and I was like, I'd like to get into this. I don't know how. You know, I was buying like the old Slater stone molds and doing that stuff and figuring out how to you're using metal fabricators to procure, you know, log. You're not selling anything like this yet. This is still super early. And so you started just, you know, I remember going to finding a big drainage ditch in Missouri that just had giant limestone stones. They were just natural, like, stones. And before I had the actual Atlas stones, that's what we would use. And so I would mess around with those. We had some hideous, like, just medieval torture device, farmer's walks, you know, that kind of, would cut your hands all up. Like, you just do what you can. Take a cambered bar, put it on our back, hang chain from it, do that as the yoke, you know, just, which is super hard because the weight's swinging, you know, that kind of stuff. So, but I got into that. And the thing that was different about that is that now you couldn't train for just 3 movements. Now you had to be a little more prepared. And so I think that's when I started to move more to, I would say, what I didn't know then, but what I would say is more concurrent type training. You had to be strong and athletic and fast. You had to, you know, you really had to have a motor on you. You had to have some sort of aerobic base, which I definitely didn't have. Again, by that time, I'm bench pressing, you know, in the mid 400s raw. I can remember missing a 185 overhead press the first workout I couldn't overhead press 185. So it was less than 50% of my bench press. And I was like, okay, this is obviously a weak link. This is a problem. Of course, strongmen don't bench press. I continued to bench press in training, but you don't compete in that. So that's really what moved me that direction. And from 2005, so in 2005, I competed as an amateur. I won Kansas Strongest Man, then Oklahoma Strongest Man, then Missouri Strongest Man as an amateur. And I remember the first one I won was Kansas Strongest Man, and I didn't have a great day. And I still won. And it's the first time I've ever done anything in sport where I'm like, I might actually be okay at this. Like this, I might actually be more gifted at this than anything else. And so I had to make a decision that year in the off season, 2005, kind of in the winter of 05. Am I going to try to go up to 330 or am I going to come down to 230 and make the 105 kilo class? Well,
what were you at the time?
Probably 265, 270. So kind of right in the middle, you know? And I thought, and I'm starting to see again, so Brian Shaw and I won our pro card at the same show. And so again, this is who's coming up, right? 6'7", at the time he was 275, but eventually, you know, 6'7", 440. I made the right choice. I went down, right? So I dieted pretty hard. And honestly, because I had done so much powerlifting training of just like heavy stuff and hadn't done the athletic stuff, I tightened up the diet a little bit and then I just, you know, trained my balls off and the weight just fell off me. And so, and then you had a 24-hour weigh-in. And so I learned how to manipulate weight again. Thank you, J.M. Blakely. Yeah. And learned how to make the 231s and made the 231s and went and took second at my first Pro-Am and then took first at the first one. And then I toured on the pro circuit from 06 to 09 or 10, somewhere in there. And in that same process, that's in 08, I opened a gym because we had a good group of guys that were training in my garage. We got pregnant with our first kid. My wife wanted a car to park in a garage, not out on the driveway when it was icy and slip and be pregnant. And so she said, you got to find a place to train. And so we looked and found a crappy little industrial building that had no heat, no air conditioning, broken windows, had a bathroom. And rented it out and taught to all, you know, we probably had 20 guys training together and they were strong dudes. And that was the beginning of Strong Gym. And so that was in 08. And
so did that start more just as a private gym? Yeah.
And so when people ask me about this, I just say, I just didn't have delusions of grandeur that it was going to be successful. It wasn't a private gym, but I also, like, we would have accepted anybody, but I'm just like, who's going to do this? It's a powerlifting and strongman gym. And so the thing that I picked up on really early is that if the place was really clean and if we had really good customer service, even though it's full of a bunch of really scary, big, bald-headed, goateed strongmen and powerlifters, people start to show up. I mean, we had a 8.5 by 11 laminated sign on the door. That was the sign. I mean, it was nothing. And people start showing up to the gym. And I was just dedicated to customer service because at the time what I saw was you had these industrial buildings where there were hardcore training facilities, but they were dirty and there's no customer service. And like, obviously somebody walks in and it's terrifying. And then you have the super boutique gyms where the customer service is amazing, but they're training like morons. They're not doing anything. And I'm like, what if we did both? What if we trained correctly And we treated people awesome, and it smelled nice and was clean.
Where do you think that comes from? Because that's one of those crossroads that we're kind of talking about earlier.
Sure.
Is a lot of guys in that position will open it up just to have a place to train.
Yeah.
And then the only real goal is to break even. Yeah, so not cost you personally any
Which
money,
it did,
or
as it always
maybe
does.
a few $100, you know, just something within reason, because that would be the advice I'd give a lot of these guys back then as well, is don't do this unless you can float it on your own.
Sure.
Right, because you might just end up floating it on your own.
That's right. That's right.
And that would be one path, and the other path would be they're going to open a gym.
Yep.
Because that's going to make them a millionaire, right? And meanwhile, they're still going to train with their crew.
Yep.
Wherever else they train.
That's right.
And
in a separate place.
So it's you combining or making that realization early on. Where do you think that comes from?
So I hit puberty really late, like 17. And I've got my wife is my high school sweetheart. We've been married almost 25 years. There's a picture. She's 2 years older than me. She's a senior. I'm a sophomore. Her arms around me. She's 5'5", 5'6". We're the same height. And so I had to learn how to compete and learn how to try to kind of carry my own. Basically playing sports with grown men, and I was still a prepubescent boy. And so I was timid and I was nerdy. And when I hit puberty, because I had spent so much time, I think, working, and I almost always started every sport I played, but I was the worst starter on the team on every sport I played. And I could look at the bench and look like, okay, there's two guys on the bench that are clearly better than me. But the coaches liked me because I had a good work ethic. And I think that came from mom and dad had great work ethics, and they taught that well. But something interesting happened when I hit puberty, and at the same time, I'm lifting weights. I found this thing that weights did for me, which they didn't just change my physical body. They changed my emotional health, my social health, right? And so I really became extroverted. I haven't always been this. I could talk, but I wasn't extroverted. And so I naturally had this propensity for customer service. Somebody would come into my gym, even though it's just this crappy little $400 a month rent place. And somebody comes in and I would walk right up to him and be like, hey, how's it going? So glad you're here. How'd you find out about us? And it was just kind of natural. Well, then it worked. And now I can remember you start talking about the E-Myth. And I'm like, well, I need to create a system so that I'm not the only person doing this. And I started realizing if we can actually make this place clean, and part of that is I'm very orderly. Again, back to the, I've got this like orderly. So I want a clean and organized gym. And I've got this extroversion and kind of just lean into customer service. And people just start showing up. And so I start to sit down with my business partners and the other guys in the gym. I would go to the powerlifters and go, look, I know you're not an owner of the gym, but just so you know, these business executives and soccer moms that are coming in, they just bought that monolift, not you, right? And so they're terrified of you. If you will walk up to them in the first 2 minutes that they're in the gym and you'll shake their hand and tell them that you're glad that they're there and that you're here to help for any reason, it will immediately tear down the wall for them. So people don't join gyms in a good spot. They join gyms in tough emotional, they've had a divorce, they've had a health scare, dad just died, they put on the dress that looked great forever and it doesn't look great. And so they go to gyms, and we're talking about big box, like these boutique gyms, and they're terrified to go in there.
Yeah.
Imagine what it was like walking in our gym. Terrifying. And so I said, we got to do everything we can to tear down that wall right now.
Well, that's a key takeaway though, too, because I'll say it again, it's a key takeaway, because when they first walk in and they see you, right, you're a professional strongman, you're 250 some pounds, jacked, their first reaction is fear.
Yeah,
right?
Of course. Yeah.
But you have their attention immediately.
That's right.
So you have their attention before anybody else. What comes out of your mouth, if it is more customer service related, is going to stick way more than anybody else, because it goes against everything they've already prejudged you about, which now if you have those other guys doing that as well, it's the same thing.
That's right.
When I was personal training people, I'm competing as a 308 bald head goatee.
Yep.
Right. Here comes this big dude, with a polo shirt on.
Yeah.
Right. And they're, oh God. And then after 2 minutes,
you tear down the walls.
It's gone. And then everybody's referring me, the big bald guy,
who's the teddy bear,
which
is great. I mean, again, and I think some people in our industry would look down on that, but like when somebody says to me like, oh, Matt Reynolds, especially when I was, before I was old and I was big and super jacked, and it was like, he's just a big, nice teddy bear. Like, I'll take that.
Well, the point that you made, it's valid and it's true. And with the demographic I was working with, Gen Pop, they don't necessarily want to be there. Right. They're doctors there.
They don't want to look like you.
You know, they don't want to admit they haven't done anything for 20 years.
Right.
They have a lot of, just the fact that they walked through the door is a huge accomplishment.
Yep.
And you don't want to destroy that.
That's right.
You know, with being a dick.
That's right.
You know, but you also don't want to destroy it. I found this out through early in my career as well, by fitness testing too soon.
No.
They already know they're out of shape.
That's right. I've never done an FMS in my life. I don't believe in that. Fitness testing is, let me teach you how to do a body weight squat and see if you can squat. Or put you on a box. You get the 4 big lifts teach you what you need to know about a person.
Yeah.
And you make modifications as you refine your craft. You figure out really soon, like I'm not going to walk a 65-year-old lady to a squat rack and put a 45-pound bar in her hands and make her overhead press it, because she can't. I know, because I've coached enough people, right? But that lady I can probably teach her how to sit on a box and stand back up. One of my favorite clients, her name is Miss Sybil. She's 89. And she came to me when she was 79. Her son was coming in. He would come in and visit her from out of town. And he was like 60 and in great shape. Great, looked like he was in his 40s. And he would get sessions from me when I owned Strong Gyms. I owned Strong Gym from 2008 to 2015. And he would come in. This is probably in 20. Well, it's been 10 years, so 2020 or 2014, somewhere there, 2013. He would come in and get sessions, and boy, I sure do wish you would work with my mom. I'm like, I'll work with your mom. He's like, I just don't know that she'd go into a gym. Now, I'll speed this up a little bit. We had grown because of that dedication to customer service and cleanliness, and also training people the right way. So they were training in, conjugate style method or linear progression. Like, they were just training correctly with a real focus on technique and consistency. They got incredible results, and they were treated awesome. And then they would come to the powerlifting meets, and then we had this huge cheering section of like business professionals and soccer moms. So the gym grows and we move, and the gym grows and we move, and the gym grows and we move. And we buy this 16,000 square foot freestanding location in the gentrified downtown area of Springfield, Missouri. Springfield's about 200,000 people in the city and 500,000 in the metro, which I would actually argue is about the perfect city for a gym like that. All 500,000 were within 15 minutes of the gym. So it's not like driving across Houston, where it's like, I think Houston's the biggest land area, 4th biggest city in the U.S., but it's massive. If you've ever driven across Houston, you can get anywhere in Springfield in 15 minutes. So everybody comes to the gym. And now we've got this huge cheering section. We got this beautiful gym. And now we've been able to build that customer service culture into the gym. And so it's clean, it smells nice. We have great locker rooms. We did things like we would clean with Pine Sol, clean the floor with Pine Sol, smell like Pine Sol, and use like mint Scentsies. Mint. So mint is not, feminine. It's like, it just smells clean. And had tremendous customer service, great coaches. And so people would get this combination of great coaching. And that gym was great because we had 3 separate gyms all under one roof. So we had a Gen Pop gym, which is still mostly barbells and, incline presses and a big 8 stack and stuff, but it was mostly free. It was free weights mostly. We had originally an MMA gym. We changed it to a CrossFit gym. And then we had the competitive powerlifting and strongman room. We had the 2 monoliths in there, the 2 big collegiate racks from you. We had all the strongman equipment. So it was great because everybody could be part of the strong gym community. They felt like they were part of a family, but they didn't have to train in that little room with the scary guys. When they walked by that little room, or if they happened to walk in that little room, the scary guys knew they were to walk over and shake their hands and say, thank you, really glad you're here. How can I help? Because again, I would remind them, those collegiate racks that we just bought from Elite, which were expensive, were bought by the soccer moms, not by you guys, right? And so that other kind of, you start talking about taking these paths, I started to realize that the best customers for us, and I think some of the best customers in fitness, which are absolutely just forgot, that Gen Pop upper middle class to upper class customer is fantastic. Everybody wants the 22-year-old competitive bodybuilder, powerlifter, whatever. They're broke. They can't stay. So we started to realize that, these are the people that are paying the bills. And it's cool because we're getting these accolades at Strong Gym because of the strong guys. Jeremy Frey started training there. He took the head coaching, strength coaching position at Missouri State. I think we had 20 guys that could deadlift 700 pounds. So again, we didn't have 10 guys that could deadlift 800 pounds like Westside. But we had 50 guys who could deadlift 500 pounds. So it was more of like the middle of the bell curve shifted to the right. It wasn't that we had the freaks of the freaks. We didn't have guys winning the WPO. I mean, well, Frey was the best lifter in the world at the time. But like outside of one or two, which those guys are going to be the best wherever they go because they're just so internally motivated. But everybody else is just like, look, we just skewed what felt like the standard of normal. And so I think when you go into a typical gym and some guy deadlifts 400 pounds at a Lifetime Fitness, everybody watches. But at our gym, if you deadlift 600 pounds, like nobody would even look. It would have to be 700 to look. So then 500 doesn't feel like that big of a deal.
Yeah.
My wife deadlifted 402 at 43 years old. The most feminine soccer mom, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, had no idea that was even strong. I didn't let her know. She didn't understand. Took her to her first meet. She wins the Masters overall and then wins the overall. And she's like, am I strong? I'm like, yeah. I mean, raw 402, raw 347 squat at 42, 43 years old. Like, yeah, that's strong. Well, it was strong, but she didn't understand it because the standard was so high. The middle of the bell curve standard, not the freak in the back corner. And so that combination of great training, great customer service, and understanding what the target demographic was, like this demographic is, they need this. Like they're going to go to CrossFit and get hurt, or they're going to go to the boutique gym and they're not going to change their life, or they're going to go to any other, and at the time there weren't any big, strong, powerlifting type gyms and get scared or have terrible customer service. We can actually do all the good things under one roof and tear down the walls. And so that's really what started to build my philosophy of business and how
did you know when to expand?
When we could afford it. I mean, that's kind of what you do. Like I don't think I've ever gone in debt into business. I mean, until Barbell Logic, we've got investors and stuff now. Yeah. So outside of that, it's just when it grew. So I was lucky because I had finished my master's to be a high school principal. I was a public school teacher. This is the other thing is I was a head strength coach of a 5A high school in Missouri for 10 years during this time period. So from like 05 to 15, 05 to, somewhere there, 04 to 14 maybe. So I would routinely have 65 kids in a high school gym all to myself, and I'm training 65 at one time. You got to figure it out, right? And it wasn't just about programming. Like I'm coaching technique. Well, you can't perfectly coach technique with 65 kids. And so, of course, I take a coach. He starts training with me. He gets strong. He actually had a 765 deadlift at one point. He becomes a really good coach. Now I got two coaches coaching 65. So now it's 30 kids. But that's still really hard to do. And so the standard for technique becomes like 90%, right? Like I'm still coaching, like if they're forward on their toes on the squat or whatever, bouncing the bench press off their chest or rounding their back on the deadlift, we're calling it out. You got to know everybody's name. You got to call them by name. You just can't say, hey, you, because there's 65 kids in the room. That really refined my coaching eye over that 10 years.
I don't want to breeze over this because you have a formal education or a formal master's in education. Right.
Yes,
so
correct.
A lot of those skills that you've learned during that time were also applied into your coaching.
For sure.
So what were some of those specific skills through that applied into the coaching philosophy?
So I was a junior high teacher, which I would argue is the hardest age. Yeah. You've got a bunch of kids who couldn't want to be there less. And so you had to learn how to become a storyteller to the point that you could get their attention and draw them in. And that's a really hard skill to learn. And love to talk, love to tell stories, but telling stories to a guy that's interested and we're talking about the same thing versus talking to somebody about algebra, or then I taught wood shop, which actually was a little bit easier, but still trying to hold their attention is very difficult for a 13-year-old. If you can do that for a 13-year-old for 10 years, you can take that into the gym, especially in a gym where you've got business professionals and soccer moms walking in like, I'm kind of scared of this. I'm uncomfortable with my body. I'm nervous. I've got walls. And you can walk up to them. The first thing you can say, like, I'm so glad you're here. Hey, you're going to be just fine. You're going to be just fine.
Well, in a way, you have to be a chameleon, too, because you have to change with whatever demographic you're speaking to.
Which is why I'm glad I'm not a teacher now, because my daughter is 13. She's the Gen Z that's got all that weird language that I don't know what any of that shit is. So that's like, I don't know their words now. I guess I would have learned it if I
in the gym, you have 3 different rooms,
That's
so
right.
The avatar that you're going to present in one room is going to be different than the other room, and it's going to be done like that.
You know where you see that easiest is it's the different music that's getting played in each room, right? So what's the music getting played in Gen Pop? Well, it's like, maybe it's top 40, but maybe it's like one step harder than top 40. What's the music getting played in the CrossFit room? Like, I don't know, hip hop or something really fast. What's the stuff getting played in the powerlifting room? Death metal. So you could know instantly when you walked into the room what the atmosphere was based on the music that's playing. And we were very intentional about that, about playing the right music for the right atmosphere at the right time. We had a cardio room, we had a dumbbell room, like even those, and we had, you know, the big stereo set up and could pump different music into each one of those rooms. And so we thought about, this seems so like I'm amazed that nobody thinks about this. And I don't think I had come up with anything incredible, but we've just thought about all the senses. We were like, what should the gym smell like to all these different people? Well, what the powerlifting room should smell like is liniment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what the main gym room should smell like is Pine Sol and mint Scentsy. And what the CrossFit room should smell like is like non-body odor sweat or whatever that is.
Chalk. I guess.
Chalk.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, it's just like, and what's the thing they see? Like even thinking about the colors and the equipment we put in there to make sure that everything, so that it felt like that atmosphere, so that when someone came in and we gave them the tour and we had systems and standard operating procedures from eMyth for exactly how to do that, they would see a room and they'd be like, this is my room. This is where I'm going to train. Like that was the goal. And so people don't think about it. What does it smell like? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What's the music playing like? You know, that kind of stuff. And we did, and people just came.
Now with those SOPs or the standing operating procedures, during that time that you had the gym, a lot of technology changed as well. You know, so systems that I had years ago, which were in manuals and stuff like that, got easily replaced just because of whatever technology they're using kind of forces that system on them. Did you see that same thing?
Not at Strong, but definitely at Barbell Logic it's been huge. So at Strong, I would make them on the computer and then I printed out checkboxes, and we did exactly like what eMyth talked about. I remember thinking to myself at the time, now I probably started charging $50 an hour or $60 an hour for training, and now I'm charging $100 an hour, but I'm still cleaning the bathrooms because I'm the owner. And I started thinking, I need to develop a system for cleaning this gym. This is not a difficult job, and it's an $8 an hour job at the time, and I could charge $50 or $60 or $100 an hour, so I'm losing $92 an hour doing this. And so I developed a system for cleaning the gym, and it was step by step, very detailed. Start with the front glass door, clean it with this Windex and this rag, and then the lobby bathrooms, ladies first, and then the men's bathroom second, because it's always grosser, right? But then the locker room's opposite. The men's locker room is nicer than the ladies' locker room because there's the hair swirls everywhere on the shower. So I had all that in place, and then we just could literally hire any college kid. We literally at one point hired like a homeless guy off the street and like, can you read? Yes, here's the system, right? And handed him the thing. And then we go to the next step. That's the cheapest wage job. And he just checked it off every day. And then every day he just like put it in the mail folder for him. And I could just look at it and see that he checked everything off. And of course, the other thing you do with those systems is you hand it to that person. You say, hey, listen, after a day or two, this is your system. You have ownership of this. You're going to find some inefficiencies in this system. And as you find those inefficiencies, you can fix them. Come and change that and talk to me. And it's yours. You have ownership of this now, right? And we did that. And then we did it to the front desk staff and then the selling staff and then the trainers. How did you
fight the initial inner battle between that? Because it's, and you've been in a position, you're in a position now where you'll suggest and tell this to other people, and their general response is going to be, dude, I don't have the time to be able to do that.
Sure.
Right. So they never do it.
Right.
Right. Where it will take a little bit of time, not that much, but a little bit of time to actually create the system.
Sure.
Which not really, because all you need to do is
it's already created. All you're actually going to tweak it 5 or 6
Yeah. Yeah. It's already created because you're doing it. You just need to write it down.
Yeah.
But there is that battle, you know, because when you're running your own place, you got a million hats that you're wearing at one time, and you have to carve out time to be able to do that. So how did you navigate that time there? Because you did it. You know what I'm saying? And most don't.
E-Myth. I mean, honestly, it was, and I told you this when I interviewed you, is like that book to this day, that book is probably the book I've given out the most, because for most people who are starting a business, and again, like I think we still utilize tons of that stuff at Barbell Logic. We're 8-figure business, like, you know, been around for 10 years. A lot of that stuff is kind of behind us at this point, but the foundation of those things are still there. But when somebody comes to me, like I have a ton of people that come to me, and young business owners, and like, where do I start? And I hand them that book and I go, read this. I go, you should read this book in 2 days. and I'm going to text you in the next few days. And if you haven't read this book yet, I'm not helping you anymore. That lets me know, are you serious about doing this or not? Like, that's an easy book to read.
Yeah.
It's not a, and so I read that book, and it was the whole work on the business, not in the business all the time. Like, I was working in the business a lot, and more than you could think, because at the time, before Strong Gym really blew up, and there was the short transition period, but from 2008 to 2012, I'm a full-time teacher, I'm a football coach, I'm the strength coach, and I'm running the gym. So I get up in the morning. I remember you were talking to Andy Baker. He's a good buddy of mine. We come from the same kind of family tree of Star and Ripito and stuff. And he's telling a story about his daily schedule. And it was the same thing. It's like, I'm getting up at 4 a.m. I'm going to the gym. I'm training clients. I'm going to school. I'm teaching all day. And then I'm coaching football or coaching weights after school or both. And then back to the gym, right, for another couple hours, and go home and go to bed and get up and do it all over again. I could never do that now. But at the time, when you have a business that's yours, I've seen this too. I think you've got about 18 to 24 months that you can burn the candle at both ends, and you can do it. At some point, you're going to burn out if you don't grow and you don't figure out how to delegate, and you're still micromanaging everything. And so I realized that day was going to come for me. So I sat down with those systems and started writing those systems. You want the honest truth? I kind of became a shitty teacher for the last couple of years. It was worksheet time. Worksheets, working on systems, right? That's really what honestly, I was probably moonlighting. Yeah, I look back with, not with some amount of shame that, like, the kids liked me. I could still tell great stories, but I sloughed off pretty good the last couple of years of the teaching, because I knew I'd already told my school, I'm not coming back next year, because I had several days where I'd make as much in one day at the gym in personal training than the take home pay was for the month in teaching. Yeah. And I'm like, how many $2,000 days do I need to have at the gym before I don't need to teach anymore? And the answer was 1. And so 2 or 3 or 5 instantly is like, I should not be teaching. Now, I was on the path to become a high school principal. I would have been in the next year or two after that, and the pay would have gone up. But now it's still only another day or two of making good money as a trainer to be able to get this. So I realized early on, like, I've got to sit down and write these systems. I can't micromanage this. That's the great thing about the system. The system is, you hand them the system, it's checkbox, they do the thing, it's over. You can literally glance at it for 2 seconds and go, they did it. And then every once in a while you spot check it, make sure they didn't check it, and actually not do it, So for me, I realized early on, I didn't want to, if we were going to scale, and Strong Gym ended up growing to about 1,000 clients. I don't know that we ever crossed over 1,000, well over 900 clients, which for a black iron barbell gym, we were probably the biggest in the country, certainly at the time. And won Powerlifting Gym of the Year in 13 and 14, not because we had the best competitive powerlifters in the world at all. Again, Westside or Big Iron or Super Training or anybody would have beat us there. But the middle of the bell curve and the number of people that we had that were just generally strong was probably the most in the country at the time. And that was really a testament to both our training methods, methodology, and coaching, and our customer service. And it seems so simple, but it's just nobody does that. It's amazing. It's like, so, you go these places, and especially post-COVID, customer service is terrible. Customer service costs nothing. And so you can spend all your time refining your craft as a coach, and you should, and your technique coaching, and you should, and your programming, and you should. And that takes sometimes time and courses and seminars and travel and all that stuff. It doesn't cost anything to be good at customer service and just treat people well. And so for me, that was my standard, that and we had some times where I had to let people go. Fireman was like, look, that's not how we treat. That's not how we treat.
Well, from a business perspective, the training is the product.
That's right.
Right. And you can have a great product, but if you can't market the product and service the product and fulfill the product and distribute the product, doesn't matter how great
the people and not churn them out.
It doesn't matter how great the product is. At what point did this come to transitioning from the gym to online?
So the problem that I saw with the in-person gym, so we scaled to a certain level, again, in that 1,000 client range, and it was successful and it made money, but not, I had 2 partners, and the more partners you have, you're splitting up any of the dividends that go out. And I'm like, we're certainly never going to get rich off this. And I had left teaching at the time. And so I'm like, if we're going to scale this, I'm just wired to, I think there's a lot of people that run business. I don't think there's anything wrong with this either. You run a good, solid, profitable business, make $100,000 a year, and you're like, I'm great. It's safe. It's good. I'm just not wired that way. I'm just like, I just want to keep growing this thing. And how are we going to grow this? Well, I saw the limitations of the in-person coaching model. And this is where the technology change really changed things in my brain. So at the time, and I still would say really good in-person coaching is great. But having access to great coaches is hard. There aren't very many of them out there. And you live in London, Ohio, or Springfield, Missouri, or middle of nowhere. What do you do with all the people in rural America? They don't have access to great coaches. The other problem with the in-person model, it was totally inflexible for both the client and the coach. It's prohibitively expensive, right? So even in Springfield, Missouri, at the time I left, it's $600-700 a month. Well, who can afford that? It's just upper class people can afford it. So your blue collar worker can't afford personal training. They don't have access to great coaches. If for some reason they like scrimp and save all their money, or even the people who had the money to pay for it, you've got to meet me at Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday at 6 a.m. every single time. And if you miss, you're paying for sessions that you didn't get. And if I went on vacation, I'm not getting paid. So you're locked into a schedule and a location. If they traveled, they didn't train. Right. So again, the type of people that can spend $700 or $800 on online personal training, travel for business, travel for vacation. Well, they didn't train when they traveled for business. They didn't train when they traveled, got on the cruise, went to the resort. And I thought there has to be a better way to do this. And with technology at the time, the cameras were getting great on the phones. And I thought online coaching was growing. And I'd been doing some online coaching. I did a few years of the typical sort of right programs for people. But I noticed the churn was relatively high. And I felt like I was excellent at programming, but we were missing something. And what we were missing was the technique breakdown and the relationship building, which at the time, up until that time, had never been done online. And so I thought, okay, what if we charged 1/4 to 1/3 what personal training cost? And we got a good collection of great coaches, and we paired the clients with the best coach for them. And then the clients would get their personalized programming, not a template from their coach. And they would film their lifts, like the heaviest squat of the day or the last set of the day of all the lifts, upload it with their phone directly on an app. And then within 24 hours, their coach would break it down. Then we actually get the programming check, the technique check. And in the breakdown, we were very intentional about making sure you try to reach out and make some sort of connection. You know, how was Sarah's soccer game, or whatever. And so you can start to build that relationship for a much cheaper price and with all the flexibility built in. So now the client can still train even at the hotel gym, even if it's not with barbells, even if you got dumbbells to 50s, we can do something. We do something at the resort. We can do and the coach, man, I've coached in Scotland, I've coached in England, I've coached in Mexico. I can coach anywhere in the world. As long as I've got a laptop with Wi-Fi, I can do it. And so I remember I was on a 8-hour trip to Tennessee, East Tennessee, and I'm just thinking about it. And my brain got going so crazy that I pulled into a gas station. I pulled the laptop out. I put it on the console, and I'm driving, and I'm typing with one hand, just, lots of typos, bullet points of like this business model. And I did that in 2015 and launched it officially January 16. And then it exploded. It exploded by the end of 16. And so we did just under $1 million a year or just under $1 million in our first year, which was mind-boggling. And like I said, now we're deep in a kind of 8-figure business. And again, I think it's because it meets the needs for most people. Now, if you have a great coach in your town, if your schedules meet, if you can afford them, I still think in-person coaching is fantastic. But you've done this a lot. Like, even in-person coaching is like 45 minutes of like rest period between, the hour session. Like, how much work is actually getting done? So now that hour-long session for the client is still an hour. But your breakdown as a coach is like less than 5 minutes. So now you can coach 20 clients in that hour. So it's cheaper for the client, but it's more money per hour for the coach. And so that's where that started to transition. And as technology's gotten better, we develop our own app. We go from typed feedback to video recording. We have integrated screen recording feedback they can see your face. You can talk to them, bend over more, or do this, or sit back on your heels, or whatever. You can draw on the screen. So technology has made it. And I think one of the things I think would be interesting to talk about is, I think for the vast majority of people at this point that online coaching is superior to in-person coaching. And I know, especially with your crowd, they're gonna gasp, because the reality is, again, if you've got great in-person coaching, nothing could ever replace the atmosphere of a Westside barbell or a strong gym. Like, that atmosphere is amazing. But what do you do with the other 7.5 billion people in the world that don't have access to it? And so I'm not trying to take people away from those great gyms. I'm trying to give access to all the people who don't have it, or who don't have access to the great coaches. And I think technology has made it where we've got a system. And I don't think programming is I don't think online programming is coaching. I don't think it's the same thing. I mean, selling programs is fine. I don't think it's morally wrong. The problem is it just doesn't take into account what happens when you get sick, or when your kid throws up all night long, or you get COVID, or you travel on the business trip and you can't do your squats and deadlifts because you only have hotel gyms with dumbbells. Well, like, we can adjust for all that stuff. So we don't sell programs. We sell coaching, and everybody gets personalized coaching and breakdowns and technique. And our average consistency for our clients is about 87%. So 87% consistency on, not per workout, on every lift of every workout for the life of the company is 87% consistency. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah. Well, I think where people will gasp on that is when you say the vast majority, they're thinking of like a minority.
Right.
Right.
They're not thinking of the vast majority.
Because there's with coaching, and you've done tons of seminars as well. So there's a whole decade, of coaching and seminars and breaking down lifts in person, working as a strength coach as well. There's a lot of intangibles that go into training where, for instance, you can, if you're in your old gym and you walk into the powerlifting room and there's 15 people in there training, within 3 or 4 seconds, because of the 2 decades you have leading up to that, just by scanning the room, who's on point, who's not.
That's right.
The nonverbal, just the feel of the room.
Yep.
There's more going on beyond just sets and reps.
Absolutely.
There's the energy between the people. There's all those factors that kind of play into that. But that, to your point, that doesn't make up the majority, right? Because the majority of the people are still learning the skill set.
That's right.
Of the sets and the reps and how the exercise is supposed to feel.
Yep.
Once you get that decade underneath you, 10,000 hours or whatever you want to say, then more comes into the coaching and the training as well.
Yep.
The ability to, I don't want to just say auto-regulate from the training perspective, but there's also auto-regulation from the environment.
Yeah.
In your brain, it's doing a max effort set that you're excited to do is going to produce different chemicals in your brain than one that you're scared to do.
Of course.
Even if you lean into the fear to do that.
Sure.
And as a coach, you can see that.
Yeah.
You can see it before it even happens.
And the atmosphere sometimes makes up for that, right? So sometimes the atmosphere, when it's great, takes you from one to the other. Like, you go from being scared to go to being like, I'm really excited about this because I got 15 people yelling at me. And it's the one thing that online coaching cannot do, is it cannot make up for the atmosphere if you've got a great atmosphere place to train. That's the one thing for sure. So the hard part about online coaching is you spend more time developing the relationship between the coach and client than you do between the client and the gym. Right. Yes. And I'll admit, and we've written our software to be able to be used really well for in-person coaching as well. So the software is great. Yeah. So I'd still love the gym model of like, you have a 24-hour gym. You have a gym that's like a nice gym. Everybody's got a keypad. You have coaching hours. So we've got most of our coaches at Barbell Logic, they're are online coaches for us. They then do in-person coaching, and they all own small gyms or whatever. And they're using the same software and stuff. And what they do is they'll have 24-hour window. Like, you can come train anytime you want. I'm here from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. and I got another coach here from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. If you're here during coaching hours, you'll get in-person hands-on coaching. If you're not here during coaching hours, you video your lift, you upload it to your coach, and that same coach breaks it down that day. And so you can get the best of both worlds. But then the problem is, what do you do with rural America that just doesn't have access to that?
Well, they don't. And even with what you're saying, I think we're both making a lot of assumptions, because we're assuming that the person who's actually training has already got through that point of the bell curve, that the training isn't really what's holding them back anymore.
Right.
And that the coach has already got past that bell curve to where they're now focused more on the nonverbals, the environment, and all those other non-definable factors, which is not the case. Sure. Right. So if, to counter kind of my own little argument here, that if the coach doesn't have to worry about the sets and the reps, and they can just now solely just look and work on their ability to read nonverbal communications, to be able to read how somebody approaches the bar, to be able to read, how they're acting in between sets, and then how that correlates to how the next set's going to actually go, then they're going to become a much better coach.
Absolutely.
And that's where, just from that in-person coaching model, I don't see
for sure,
as well as what it has been in the past.
Sure.
Because of that. But I think a lot of that's just due to we're not seeing the longevity of the coaches that we used to see before.
Yep.
It takes a long time.
Yep.
To be able to see somebody pick a squat and know just from the look in their eye, they're going to get, they're going to miss this.
Right. Or make it.
Or even before that,
right.
If they're getting ready for a lift, if their eyes are shifting side to side.
Yeah. You get all the time. Or they're doing a heavy set of 5, and after 4, you can see them lose their confidence. And they're going to go down to number 5 and set this thing on the pins. They're not even going to try. And they go down and just set it on the pins. And you go, what were you, and so my feedback would be like, what went through your brain between rep 4 and 5? What did you think about? Because you could see it. You can see it on video too, right? So there's always opportunity cost, and the opportunity cost of losing the in-person model is the potential for fantastic atmosphere. But again, you think about the majority are training at big box Globo gyms where the atmosphere sucks anyway, right? We are very pro home gym. Of course, COVID hit, helped us tremendously. About 50 to 60% of our clients were training at public gyms when COVID hit, and now about 70% of our clients train at home because they had to, because every gym in the world closed down. And so that's the other thing that online gives you. It gives you I love the fact that people can just walk down to their basement or walk out to their garage and they can train. They can train with their wives. They can train and model it for their kids. They can do all that kind of stuff. So there's always an opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of online coaching is you don't get the same atmosphere as you do, certainly in this gym or a Westside or a Strom. But the opportunity cost or the consequence of the in-person model is it's very expensive. You're locked into a location. You're locked into a schedule, all of those things. And for the coach, especially the coaches, guys like me who live in Springfield, Missouri, my potential client pool are just people in Springfield, Missouri, or within 15 minutes of me, who are also looking for the kind of coaching I'm doing. By going online and doing it well, and I think one of the big things we're trying to do at Barbell Logic is to really raise the standard of online coaching. It's not selling templates, right? That's a different thing. Really raise the standard. But as soon as I provide fantastic coaching online, I've now expanded my client pool to the entire world. I mean, we coach military guys in Tunisia, and it doesn't matter where they are, they can get training now, right? And then it's the same thing for the client. If you're in Podunk, wherever, or even if you're in San Francisco or Manhattan, those coaches are $1,600 a month, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
So now, even if you're in a big city or rural, you now have access to the best coaches in the world. Just about every great coach is doing some form of online coaching. And what we're trying to do is just up the standard and say, look, online coaching is not just templates and programming. As a matter of fact, I would argue programming is third, especially for online. First is, it's a combination of consistency and technique. I want consistency for my clients and right technique. And when all I do is sell a template, I don't know if they have either because I just sold them 12 weeks. But what do you do when they get sick for 2 weeks? They start the program over? Do you selling templates, right? So to me, it's worth it. The trade-off is worth it for most people to go online if they can get a level of service that probably most people haven't thought about. Or again, I'm sure most of your listeners, you got a ton of listeners that are coaching. Like you coaches out there, you can provide a level of service that you can make $200, $300, $400 an hour doing online coaching, expanding your client pool to the entire world. But the goal, it comes all back to that strong gym mentality of you have got to provide a level of service and professionalism that the rest of the world is not providing. And this is not that hard to do in the fitness industry, right? This is not like customer service is not our specialty, which means the cream rises to the top. So if you provide excellent customer service, excellent technical feedback via screen recordings and whatnot, excellent support and building trust and relationship with your client, like appropriate trust and relationship with your client, nobody else is doing that. And now the clients get the freedom to do it anywhere they want. It's a quarter of the price for them or a third of the price for them. And it's 4 or 5x per dollar per hour for you. It's win-win on both. And that's what's made Barbell Logic successful. None of that would have happened without the lessons learned at Strong Gym.
Yeah, well, there's another phase that we kind of skipped there where at what point during this timeline did you start doing the seminars and moving around the country? Because I bring that up because when I started going around doing that, you get kind of like slapped in the face with the reality that not everybody really knows how to do these lifts very well. For sure. Because you'll see new people come into the gym and then you can clean that stuff up. Then you kind of take it for granted because it's over a 6 or 7 technique. Then you go out and you start doing that. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh God, you know, at what point during this cycle did you start doing that?
You remember the old Seinfeld episode where they're like, what percentage of people are attractive in this world? And they're having this conversation, and there's like, they're like 90% of the people are unattractive. And like, really? It's like, have you been out there? It's a leper colony. That's what they say. And like, that's the same. It's like, if you've been a competitive powerlifter or strongman, you've trained correctly, just walk into any of the big box Globo gyms for 2 minutes and just scan the room and tell me what percentage of people are training correctly. It's extremely low percentage, right? And so this is a big issue. So yeah, sorry, what was the question?
Well, the question was, at what point during this timeline did you start going out to do the seminars?
So I was writing for bodybuilding.com in the early 2000s, and I think in about 2003, I interviewed Glenn Penley, who was the head Olympic weightlifting coach at Ripeto's gym. And then the next year, I interviewed Ripeto, and he's writing the first edition of Starting Strength at the time. And so I do an interview. I did the first interview I think he ever did, certainly about Starting Strength, and was on bodybuilding.com. And then he starts to do the seminars and do it for CrossFit, and does the CrossFit Total and all that kind of stuff. And we just maintained just sort of a acquaintance level, not necessarily friendship or anything. Didn't know each other very well. And he called me, I think in 2009, somewhere in that ballpark, and said, hey, I want you to come take this seminar down in Wichita Falls, and it's really hard to pass. I want you to know it's a coaching seminar. It's got like a 5% pass rate, but I want you to try to pass it. I don't know if you will, but I also want feedback. I know you've been a competitive powerlifter and strongman. You're a good coach. You've done strong gym for years and all that kind of stuff. And so I did, and it was great, man. It was great. And so, it's crazy. A lot of people, anybody that knows me knows that I was in a pretty bad lawsuit with Ripeto back in 2019, not affiliated with each other whatsoever. And yet there's sort of this weird, nostalgia and loyalty there. It's like, that guy was my mentor, and he taught me so much about strength training. He was the first guy I ever heard talk about physics of lifting. You had Andy Baker on the show. Andy's been on my podcast many times and has stayed affiliated with that organization. And so I did for about 9 years, I did hundreds of starting strength seminars. And then as Ripeto got older, I started doing all the lectures. I did all his lectures, and then he let me start tweaking the lectures a little bit. And I can remember he told me, and it's the first time I had ever thought about this. He told me one night, we do the lectures and we go hang out in his hotel room, drink whiskey, and he's like, you're the only person that lectures like me. And I said, what does that mean? He goes, when you lecture, you're learning. He's like, I can see the wheels turning in your head. He's like, you're 2 steps ahead of the lecture, and you're learning as you're talking. And each lecture is a little better than the previous one because you're learning as you're getting up there and talking about it. And it started me down the process of how do I learn, and the acquisition of knowledge, and how I turn that into wisdom and hopefully share that with other people. And I'd never heard that before. And so I think it was the reason he trusted me to be able to do his lecture. I mean, they were his lectures. I mean, it was he just handed me the notes, and then I just started to work off of them. And so did that for about 10 years, and opened up the online coaching affiliated.
Well, that's a repetition thing too.
Oh,
so
huge.
If we peel this way back, you have all the repetition of your own training, then training the athletes in your gym, or then going out and, educating other people that you've never met before. That's a different skill acquisition.
Including potential coaches, right? So you're not just training clients now, you're training coaches to be coaches, or up and coming coaches.
Yes.
Which take it up a notch. So now you don't just think about, when you're training a client, you're just trying to get them to move the way you want them to move. But when you're training a coach, you have to somehow communicate to them how to have them communicate to their client to get them to move the way they want them to move. So again, it takes it up a level of depth of knowledge of learning. And
the other thing there is, in your own gym, you can work somebody's technique over a period of weeks, months, a year. In a seminar / clinic or whatever, you have a day.
That's right.
And in that day, you have to figure out what's the most important thing. What are they going to retain? Where can this biggest difference be made? And that starts that development of a whole nother skill set, as well as the lectures. As you're giving that, the first couple, you're like, man, they didn't take anything away from this. Where did I screw up? And you got to learn how to process that on the fly. And all this is an accumulated skill that builds builds and builds and builds into what you have now.
Yep,
you know, that's
sure.
why I want to lay all this out, because there'll be a lot of people that see what you have now and say, oh, I can do that. Like, oh, now wait a minute.
Sure.
You know, there's a lot of skill acquisition,
Right.
you know, that went into the product.
That's right.
Before you even get into the business, and to be able to streamline that product takes hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, thousands of hours, that I don't want that to get lost on aspiring coaches or even people that are training to be their best.
That's right.
Because you got to get past this point where the skills that you're working on now become automatic, and then you can start focusing on the other weaknesses or skills that can apply to that. And those other weaknesses or skills you were able to take from your education background to put in there, to take from a theology background to put in there, take from other backgrounds to be able to put in there. So having those other interests, you know, that kind of relate.
Sure. No, they definitely do. I can see the pattern.
Well, that you can, because you've implemented them.
That's right.
Other people may not.
Right. They're like, I don't see how it has anything to do with this.
Well, that's why it's important to have other things.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, you have those other things, and you can pull from that. And it's, you know, you've spoke to a lot of coaches, so you can speak to just a lineman coach.
Yep.
Not really that concerned with the weight room, but it's just as they're talking about their coaching, if you're paying attention, you'll see patterns.
Of course.
Like, oh, okay, I can take that and then relate it to this, instead of being the person, which you're not, and this is what I'm trying to put out there, being the person that I can't learn anything from this dude.
That's right.
You know, would he just shut up so I can tell him how to get his linemen stronger?
Right.
It's like, ooh, now wait,
you
you just missed everything.
Yep.
You know, because eventually that will come back and play into all those factors.
Always. And I think pattern recognition is such a huge piece of I think being able to take the time, and this is again part of not just working in the business or on the business, but working on yourself, is actually taking some time to sit down and try to figure out, how does this all work together in my own brain? And I think so I'm writing a book right now that Forbes is about to publish, called Undoing Urgency. And it's how we get like drowning in urgency. Everybody's drowning. Remember when we were kids, you know, somebody said like to your dad, or to a voice crack, when we were kids, said to your dad or my dad, would be like, you know, how's it going? And they would be like, good. And now when you say, how's it going? Everybody says busy. So we're drowning in this urgency. And so we don't take the time to think about the stuff that really matters and it's really important. And so actually thinking through like your learning process and all of these inputs that have come in over the years, how I learned from teaching junior high kids, how I learned from a religious studies degree, how I learned from Mark Rippetoe or Glenn Penlay, or reading Dave Tate or Louis Simmons articles, or even just experiencing the atmosphere at Westside the 2 times I got to train there. Like, those are all inputs, right? And, or even going to, honestly, like I still actually enjoy sometimes going to the Taj Mahal Life Fitness gyms. Is that what they're called? The big giant ones, you know, just to see like what that world looks like. And it's just like, that's an input.
Yes.
And I go, what can I take from this that will work? And where is this like just total utter bullshit? Right. And so you do that. So you look at all those, but that takes time. And I think a lot of times people don't sit down and ever actually consider that stuff. So this is where people don't have to have the same worldview as me. And this is where I think a lot of times people take the time to read or do spiritual disciplines. I like to sit down. I like to do both those things, but I like to sit down and just think sometimes, and just think about like, how is this all working together, and how am I turning that pattern recognition becomes a big piece of it. And then what I found, and we talk about this all the time, coming back to you talking about the coaches and the sort of don't get confused about overnight success. There is no such thing. And, I've been doing this for 30 years, and is the concept of voluntary hardship is everything. We have to choose things that are voluntarily, anything that's worth anything that has value is hard. Nothing comes easy. So that concept of overnight success doesn't exist, right?
How would you define voluntary hardship?
You choose a thing that's hard that you don't really want to do. So that could be a squat. I think squat is a great general version. Like, no one's going to make you put a squat on your back and put the bar with the weight that you're scared of and go down, and you got to do a set of 5 and you're not sure if you can get 3. That's voluntary hardship. Now, I don't think this I don't think squatting alone refines people to the, and nor do I think strength is the most important thing in life, which Ricoto would say, right? But it is a thing that's voluntarily hard. I think other things are voluntarily hard. I think working on my relationship with my wife, I think a good marriage is hard. I think raising your children to be, well-adjusted individuals are super hard. I think that building a big business is hard. Like, you choose at some point to leave your job, I did as a teacher, and start a business. That's voluntary hardship. Involuntary hardship is cancer, prison, car accident, tore the hamstring, whatever. But here's the thing. Sometimes we're refined by involuntary hardship. Some guys go to prison and they get better. Most don't. Some people get cancer and get better, but it's not guaranteed, right? Whatever the thing is. Some people go through the divorce and they get better. Some get worse. Voluntary hardship, if done for the right reasons, I think always refines.
Yeah, my counter to that would be, if it's voluntary hardship, then is it really hard because you're selecting what you want to be hard?
Okay, great question. Let's run down that. So let's go down that. So how hard has it been to run this company over the past, what has it been, 20 years?
Oh, there's been brutal times, but those brutal times when they come, they weren't per se voluntarily. It's like,
but you chose the business.
Yes.
Right. And so this is I think this is a super important point. At some point, and you and I talked about this, you made a choice to start this business, right? And you're with $500 worth of equipment or whatever it was, not very, like you had almost, and if you had sat down, if somebody had come to you, or like the you of today sat down to Dave at however old you were at the time, and said, hey, I want to show you all the stuff that you're going to have to go through over the next 20 years, you probably wouldn't do it.
No, there's no way I'd
That's
do
right.
it.
I just heard a great quote from Jensen Huang, is the CEO and founder of NVIDIA. That's like one of the most valuable companies in the world right now, because they make the big CPUs for the AI stuff. And these guys were asking him on a podcast, like, what would you go back and tell the younger you about the business? He said, I wouldn't do it. So what do you mean? It's got $1 trillion market cap. Wouldn't do it. He said, if I had any idea how hard it was actually going to be, there's no way I'd do it. He said, the great power in entrepreneurs is the fact that they know it's going to be hard, but they think they're going to get through it anyway. There's no concept of how hard it is. Listen, marriage is the same thing. Like, I mean,
it's more a question of not quitting.
That's right. But you still choose, right? Again, you choose marriage, or you choose the job, or you choose the thing, or you choose to squat, or you choose like, hey, I'm going to go after an 800-pound squat. I would ask you at the beginning, do you think that's going to be hard? Yes. And then you get to the point where you're, 6 weeks out from the meet, and you've got all this fatigue built up, and you haven't started to deload yet, and you feel terrible. It feels like utter shit. And you want to quit and not do the meet. I've had lots of clients do this. And I'm like, hey, did you think it wasn't going to be hard? Like, no, I thought it was going to be hard. How hard did you think it was going to be? Well, I thought it was going to be really hard. This hard? Yeah, maybe not this hard. Okay, so hold on. So we have an issue now where your expectations and your reality are not in alignment. Really, really hard feels really, really shitty. And that's the new normal. But we choose it because all good things that we accomplish are hard. And then the last piece to that is this. I would argue that real, long-lasting joy in life actually comes from the pursuit of those hard things, not the accomplishment of those hard things.
It takes some wisdom to come to that conclusion over time. Because I agree. Yeah. I agree. And I agree on voluntary hard. Yeah. I'm just throwing out what I've seen people push back against that with. And my counter to that would be, maybe your voluntary hard needs to be harder. Maybe it needs to be a stretch, right? And because sometimes when people will hear that, do hard things, they selectively pick things they kind of know they can do.
Then it's not that hard.
Then it's not that hard, but
then it's voluntary, but not hard.
Yeah, and perhaps that's a skill, and it's an acquisition that come over time, because I've said this before, the hardest somebody's ever worked is the hardest they've ever worked.
That's right.
So they don't know there's other levels.
That's right.
And there are way other levels. There's levels beyond what we know.
That's right.
Which is kind of scary as hell to think about.
Oh yeah, I was watching the movie, the Alive or whatever it is, the guys that crashed in the airplane up in like the Canadian Rockies or whatever, and they're out there, and they have to eat their buddies and put, they're like cutting their flesh off and putting it on top of an airplane, and they're out there for like 55 days or something. That's real hard.
Oh yeah,
But you know what? It wasn't voluntary.
It wasn't voluntary, yes.
My guess is if you went back and studied those guys, I bet there's a few of those guys who came out incredibly resilient from that.
Oh,
and I bet there's another handful that lived that's got real bad PTSD and their life went terrible afterwards.
Well, I believe that, the amount of voluntary hard that you accumulate over time is going to make it a little easier to be able to handle the involuntary
That's
hard.
exactly right. That's the reason we do it.
Yes.
Because everyone, you are guaranteed to have involuntary hardship thrown in your life. Your mom or dad's going to die. You're going to get divorced. Your kid's going to get sick. You're going to get COVID. You're going to lose your job. You're going to get sued. All of those things are involuntary. The more I've taken the time to choose voluntary hardship, and I really honestly believe, like even something like working hard in the weight room for 20 years and doing things physically that I didn't think I could do, I think have helped me get through things like lawsuits and tough business times and working on my marriage and doing those things because I continually choose not just the weight room, but continue to choose voluntary hardship so that when I'm exposed to involuntary hardship, I'm better trained to handle it, right? It's what you do in the weight room here is not a meet, but you're doing hardship to prepare for the meet. And then you go to the meet, and the meet's not quite like it is at your gym. It's always a little different. Day runs a little long. You're deadlifting at 8:30 at night sometimes. Like it's a little bit different. But had you not trained at all, you're not prepared for the meet at all, right? And so that's the key. It's voluntary hardship is just training for the hardship that life is going to throw at you that will be involuntary. So when you get cancer, you're better apt to handle it.
Well, I totally believe that. Sometimes I don't think you'll connect those dots until after that involuntary hardship is through. And because there's certain things that I've had to deal with in business that, if it happened again now, I'd be like, whatever.
Yep.
But then
it felt like the end.
It was like, oh man, this is a disaster.
This is going to destroy the business.
This is going to destroy everything.
Yep.
But the reality is it's never as good as what you think it's going to be, and it's never as bad as you think it's going to be.
I say it all the time.
It just kind of falls somewhere in there, which is training.
Yep, that's right.
And
I don't want to be Zuckerberg or Bezos or but you think about Elon Musk or somebody that owns literally or Jensen, guys that own $1 trillion companies, but you think about their level of stress. They get called in front of Congress and I'm thinking about a lawsuit that nobody really knows about was like the hardest thing I ever went through. And you've got some things like that, right? It's just, I don't know if you have to be a sociopath to get to the point that those guys are at, but I wonder what level of hardship comes before it really rattles them. And just like you, I've owned business for 16 years. You own business longer than I have, but I'm 16-year business owner at this point. It takes a lot to rattle me at this point in business, right? Things that would have just sent me into a spiral 14 years ago just don't anymore. Now, don't get me wrong. There's still, and I'm knock on wood, I would prefer to not get involuntary hardship.
Yeah.
But it is. I mean, it's because you train through both voluntary hardship and you have the experience of involuntary hardship throughout life. And so that makes you more resilient.
So what has been, from the business side, one of the hardest involuntary things that you've had to deal with?
Oh God, we have tons. I mean, it's the lawsuit. I mean, when Rupato sued me, which I want to be careful and not, and I also want to be gracious again, because I really do have some. I think Rupato's a great, one of the best strength coaches of all time. He's a big Bill Starr fan. I love Bill Starr as well. But he's my mentor, And so the first time you're in a lawsuit in a business, even if it's with a stranger, it's this terrifying thing because you don't really understand the process. You don't understand discovery and depositions and all these things because I'd never been in trouble. I'd never been to court. I'd never been sued. And, but when it's also was personal because it's like your mentor, that was tough. And so, man, it was hard, but then I look back and it was one of the best things that ever happened to Barbell Logic because we were able to kind of be ourselves and grow into our own culture out of that and being and stepping away from that. But you don't see that in the moment. Like you said, you see it later, like, oh, we were really refined by that. There were times we had to do things in discovery process, like in a 24-hour period, that we had to gather so much information that if you saw the spreadsheet, you'd be like, that's impossible. And we just put the all hands on deck and we gathered it all and then we got it. And then what happened out of that is it grew the team closer together because we were in survival mode. And so that's been a big deal. I was bought out of Strong Gym by a business partner. We brought in a third business partner. I had two business partners. I'll just say Will was one of them. He was great. And the other one we brought in later His family had a lot of money. And when there's 3 business partners and you vote, and 2 are always voting against the third, and the third has all the money, the third doesn't like it at some point. And so we ended up getting pushed out of that business, and that was difficult. I mean, I can remember going home from the gym that day. I had left my job teaching. I'd left my potential being a principal. I'd been at the gym for a few years full time, and it was my baby. And I started it. I didn't found it with the guy who was pushing me out. He came in a few years before he pushed us out. And dude, I just went home and cried like a baby because I lost my gym. But then I got in a car and we drove down to we went down to South Padre Island. We stayed there for 3 weeks, and I thought, what am I going to do next? And that's when that thought process of like, wait a minute, there's actually all these inflexibilities with in-person training I think I could do online. At the time, I had just been on, in the previous year, I think twice, I'd been on the Art of Manliness podcast with Brett McKay. So I've been his coach for 10 years. The guy's, here's a perfect example of a totally normal looking guy. Like, he looks great, but, you know, not a big jack powerlifter, deadlifts 615, you know, like just a normal dude, but like a 615 raw, totally raw, conventional deadlift. And I'd been on his podcast. It has like 5 million downloads a month. I mean, it's a huge podcast. And I got all these online coaching clients, and I was putting them through what is now the model we use at Barbell Logic. And so I get kind of pushed out of Strong Gym, and I call my little brother, who's been even more successful in business than I have. And I said, man, I think I'm going to open this little executive barbell club, like in-person place, kind of high-end, you know, whatever, nice equipment, leather chairs, little bourbon bar. He said, how's online coaching going? I was like, you're online coaching some, right? Yeah. He goes, how much, you know, what are you making online? I was like, 10,000 a month. He goes, what? I said, like, he goes, why don't you take 6 months? Because we had gotten bought out, so we had some money to live on for a while. So why don't you take the next 6 months and just put all the eggs in the online coaching basket and see if that works? And it's the first time I really ever thought, when you probably got a bunch of people listening to this today, they're hearing me, online coaching it's not tangible. Like, it wasn't tangible to me. Going to the gym, getting up at 4 every morning, driving to the gym, unlocking the door, turning the security system off, training client, there was a tangibility to it.
Yes.
Right. And so there was this thing where it's like, I don't know that this thing's going to last. Like, online, I don't know. Is that real? Is it not real?
Well, you're also part of a demographic that the perception was first seeing this emerge. And when you're doing it in person, but you're seeing it here, then your perception, or the general perception, is that's bullcrap.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's not going to work. That's because you're trying to validate what you're doing.
Of course.
More so than what the possibility of that is. And that's
exactly right.
That's a big mind shift for a lot of people. You know, and that's
happens all the time.
That's being able to step out and look at the whole area from a completely different perspective, which may violate every bias that you actually have.
That's exactly right. Right. We get stuck being the steel industry of the 70s and saying it's not going to go away. It'll come back.
Yeah.
Nope. And again, we've got something to contend with the rise of AI. I mean, I think AI is a perfect example of AI is going to take over programming.
Oh yeah.
Like, if you know how to prompt it, you can do
it now.
Right now, minimum effective dose, Barbell Logic, prompt it, you can get all of my programming, which means if all I'm selling is programming, I'm dead. Mm-hmm. My career is over. So you better change. You better figure out how to have a higher level of service and relationship with clients, right? But these are the lessons learned. So like in getting pushed out of the gym, there's this intangibility of online coaching. Okay, I sat down and started writing systems. I started working the online coaching. Now I'm not doing it an hour or two a day, you know, before, after working at the gym. I'm like all in, full time. We were homeschooling our kids, by the way. I can remember coming home, and so I had this idea. So I've been going to the gym. My wife was also a teacher, and when I left teaching for the gym, the next year she left teaching. I said, you don't have to teach anymore. Gym's doing pretty well. Like, let's raise the girls, and we're professional teachers. Let's teach our kids. So I had this idea of what homeschool looked like at my house. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, so we had this big kind of conference table, real nice conference table. And I just thought, well, we'll just all get up and sit at the table, and I'll work on business and they'll work on school. And then you realize it's just like this mass chaos is homeschool. And I'm like, what is this? And they're like, we're homeschooling. And I was like, oh my God, this is okay. So I immediately make an office downstairs in the basement, do my office in the basement, and start working. And I start writing systems for online coaching, while at the same time training my family on how to do things like Pomodoros and efficient work for homeschool. Because I would notice, like, we're doing homeschool and it would still take them like 7-8 hours to get their homeschooling done. And I'm looking at the amount of work they have to do, and I'm like, that's not 7 or 8 hours worth of work. That's 90 minutes worth of work. Well, it just takes that long. It's hard to, whatever, motivate the girls. Like, I'll motivate the girls, right? Send one down. And I would spend a couple days with them, and we would do, I don't know if you know what Pomodoros, we do like 25 minutes of totally undistracted work. I'd start one of my daughters out on work. I would work on a system for Barbell Logic, and we work for 25 minutes. You're not going to talk. You're not going to go to the bathroom. I'm not getting coffee. When the timer goes off, we take the break. Timer goes off, take the break. How much did you get done? She's like, I got the whole thing done. I was like, see what undistracted work does? Mm-hmm. Like, man, time is the most finite resource. And so learning how to use that well is a huge lesson learned. So anyway, this losing the gym was very difficult, but I would never have Barbell Logic without it. And then getting sued by Rippito was incredibly difficult, the hardest thing I've ever done in business. But I wouldn't own an 8-figure business that had its own brand name without it. Still very grateful for the things I learned from all of those guys. I've learned from even the guy that pushed me out of the gym. Like, there's a part of me wants to come up and give him a hug and be like, I don't know if you had done that. I may still be running Strong Gym right now and not run Barbell Logic. So again, you start to see those pattern recognitions of all this stuff comes together and refines us if we allow it to.
Yeah, well, the key part there, right? If you allow it to, and all those things, when I can go back to that original question of, knowing what I know now, would I have still done this? And the answer is still probably no. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that whatever the alternative was going to be easier. No. Could have been way harder.
And worse.
And way
could have
worse.
been harder and worse.
Most definitely.
Right.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
There's just certain things from the start that manifested over a period of time that has a bigger compound effect, margins example, that play a way bigger role than what you originally, 3 partners, that you don't think at the time, because you're like, oh, cool. Yeah. We can just, split up the work. Would never get split up the way it's supposed to. Yeah. But over a period of time, you can look back and say, ooh, maybe that wasn't the best call, because now somebody's getting a third that barely ever shows up.
That's right.
And those are play into decisions that lead into the future.
That's right.
Right. Yep. So without those, you don't propel yourself forward, but you have to recognize what you've learned from it.
That's right.
And sometimes you may not want to reflect back on it until you're far enough away to reflect back on it, or have people around you that are in different businesses that can advise you, even while you're going through it. Yeah. Because I went through a suit that was a major one as well. And having people around me from different areas and at different levels, higher levels of success, are like, dude, this is not a problem. I'm like, what do you mean it's not a problem? Yeah. But that helps as well, especially when it's different industries, because they'll see opportunities that you won't see.
That's right.
Which
you're so in it. You're in the trenches. You can't see the forest of the trees.
Yes.
And because the trees are burning down around you. Right. But you're like, and they pull back and like, hey man, this is a 10,000 square mile forest. Like you got a fire right here and you're in the middle of the fire. There's an opportunity here, but you can't see it because you're about to burn up.
Or sometimes you can't see it because your lane is too narrow. It's just programming.
Yep. That's right.
It's just that, it's like, well, that's all I want to do. I'll hire up, okay, well, good luck with that. Yep. Because you still have to kind of know. Yep. And so that would be the next question is, as this has grown, you have to hire people that have skill sets that are beyond what you have.
For sure.
But you still have to know enough about that skill set to be able to make sure that they're actually doing the things that they're supposed to be able to do, which means you have to broaden your skill. It never stops. Right. You have to keep broadening your skill set. Right. So how was that navigated over time?
Yeah. In the beginning, a founder, CEO does every single job in the entire business. That's the deal. Like you are the HR person and you're the manager and you're the coach and you're the CEO and you run the payroll and you do all the stuff. And so, but the business can't scale if it's always you, right? So at some point, you've got to hire people. Now, very quickly, the caveat there, which I think is a good lead in here, is after everything we just said about how painful running a business is and owning a business, I don't look down upon like blue collar guys that just want to go punch the time card and the safety of that, like, that's fine. Like, this life is not for most people. Like, this level. I also don't have any problem with people that run real small mom and pop businesses. They're like low stress, everything. Like, that's fine too. Again, unfortunately,
half my life I'd rather do that.
Yeah, of course, right? You're like, man, how good would it be if I had 3 employees or just my family worked as had a family-run business and just whatever, made 6 figures and called it good, right? Way lower stress. Again, I'm not wired that way. I don't know why. It just is. And I think part of it is, again, I wasn't just a painfully average athlete. I would say I was smart, but I was also like unbelievably forgettable. Like, I think I was the kind of guy, I went to a decent sized high school and wasn't super popular at all. It wasn't until I came back to my 10-year reunion and I was a pro strongman. I was like super jacked and they were like, wait, you're Matt Reynolds? And I'm like, you know, like they didn't really even hardly know, like I was just forgettable. And I think a lot of, again, and I think strength training did this for me and competitive powerlifting and strongman pushed me to a spot that like I wanted to accomplish a thing in life. And I don't know, I haven't been uber psychoanalyzed of that. Because that is the case, and because I wanted to continue to grow this business that we have, I recognize that to scale it, I've got to hire good people. And so you start out by learning everything you can learn about. I'm paying out payroll. I remember running payroll 2 years in, year and a half in on the business, and I hate it because it's coming out of my account, right? And I'm doing the math on the Excel spreadsheet, and every time you add the thing in, the number at the bottom gets bigger, and you're like, God damn it, you know. And we were growing like crazy, and so the payroll's getting more every single month. And then all of a sudden I'm thinking to myself, why am I doing payroll? What the hell am I doing payroll for? There are people that do this, right? And so we hired a payroll company to do that. And we had a system and wrote it and worked it. But then I hired a head chief experience officer, CXO. So we don't have like a Toby from The Office. Have you ever watched that? All the bad stuff you think about an HR person. It's like, you got to watch all these videos about, we don't have anything like that. But we do have a person that's Nikki Sims. She's amazing. She's our CXO, and she is really there to help with client and staff experience and payroll and retirement funds. And so when I first hired her to start in the position that she is now really fully in, and she also carried 7 or 8 hats when she first came on, it was a team of 2. She was not as good at her job as I was at her job for the first couple of months. But if you do this well and you do it right, she will surpass you. And she is 100 times better at her job than I could be at her job now. And you multiply that by 100, and my COO, Andrew Jackson, is 1,000,000 times better than I could be. He's an engineer from lean manufacturing. He's applied lean manufacturing to online coaching. No one has ever done that. He is unbelievable at what he does, right? My CMO, Josh, is unbelievable. Like, I don't know how to do HubSpot and marketing, so at some point you have to trust people. Like, I think it's a high trust. Being able to grow a business has to be high trust. You're either going to micromanage yourself to death or micromanage your team to death, and it'll kill you in the process because you just keep working more hours. Or at some point you write good systems and you hand it off and you trust that they're going to do it okay. Sometimes they don't, and you course correct, or you fire and replace. That's what you do. Now everybody on the team is significantly better at their job than I could have ever been at their job. And I once did their job 7, 8, 9 years ago, right? And so I think at some point you just have to decide, are we going to grow this business? Am I going to trust people? Knowing that people are going to let you down. There's times people are going to let you down, but it probably isn't going to kill the business, right? And so I think that's what people are scared of. They're scared to give any of that baby away. Like, this is my baby. I can do this better than, yeah, you can. But if you can hire somebody that can do it for a quarter or half the pay of what it would cost you, what your time is worth, and get 80% of the that's a clear win. And if you train them well, then the business succeeds because now they're better at their job than you would be.
So how did you navigate with your CXO, I believe is what you've... Yep. She had 7 hats when she started, but as it grows, you have to hire other people, right? Because some of those hats have to come off. Yep. But the issue you can run into with that is that person may like certain jobs of each one of those hats, but they want to keep all those. Yep.
That's a great question. We've had to have all those conversations. Like, you get to a point where, first off, at some point, that person wearing multiple hats starts to get overwhelmed, and you start to see, at least you see burnout coming. They may not be burned out, and you hope you don't get them that far, but you start to see
what they really want is just to unload the stuff they don't like.
Correct.
But that's not the answer.
It doesn't always work that way, right?
Yeah.
And so you say, okay, well, you're really wearing this hat, and this hat. I really think you're like most skilled here. Where do you think you're most skilled, or where you get the most joy, right? And actually the CXO position is an interesting one, because that was not really her first choice, and she has crushed it since she did it, because she's grown into it and done incredibly well. My COO was different. I mean, he was wired to be a COO. My CMO, different. He wired to be. My head of customer service, who is under my CXO, Nikki Berman, our head customer service person, she is just like the most naturally gifted customer service person ever. I got really lucky, man. We hired 30 coaches, most of whom were starting strength coaches in the very beginning. I knew they were technically proficient, and because I'd done all the seminars, I knew the ones that had the right personality to coach, right? There are really good technical coaches out there that don't have the personality to do this. I hired coaches that were both great coaches and had the personality, because I knew that the personality hurdle online is a bigger deal. That's way harder to make a connection online. So you've got to have some, and the cues and how you speak to people is different than the way you would in person, because you're going from real time to an asynchronous model. Now I'm cueing you after you did the workout so that you remember the cue for the next workout. Well, that's harder, right? And so but I got really lucky that I got like 30 or 35 of some of the best humans that ever lived. And some of those people continued to, like, the cream rose to the top, and they coached for me, and they made good money coaching. And then you're just like, man, this coach has the best customer service on the entire team. We really need a customer service person. And so then we would go to the person and say, hey, let's talk about, are you interested in taking over customer service? You can continue to coach for additional money. You can coach and do customer service. And so most of our team, up until the last 2 years or so, were kind of raised up from the inside. Now, we went from 30, 35 coaches to 50 coaches to 60 coaches to 80 coaches. And some of those came in and have risen to the top as well. And now we're at the point that we're big enough that hiring stuff like CFOs and stuff, there isn't anybody on the team. Like, we have to go outside to get that, or a head social media person or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's really, I think, just training your people well. And a lot of this comes, and I don't want to just skim over this. The core values you set in your business from the very beginning, they stick with the business for as long as you're there, for sure, and often for years after the founder leaves.
How did you go about establishing those?
I am a super core value driven. I'm just a man.
Well, let me reframe that question a little bit too.
Yeah.
When did you establish those?
Okay.
And when did you know that was going to be important?
Can we take a break real quick?
Yep.
And I'll come back, because that's a great story.
Yeah. Hey guys, if you like and want to support the podcast, remember we have limited edition items. These items can range anywhere from t-shirts, tank tops, sweatshirts, cups. You never know what you're going to get. Check them out at www.elitefts.com.
Maybe you've hit your first plateau and you're thinking of hopping on gear, but you realize you're already too small because you're too scared to put more weight on the bar. What do I do? You can support the podcast and get access to the elitefts Table Talk Discord, which has some of the most valuable information you'll ever get. Access to hundreds of ebooks, assuming you can read. Go ahead and cancel your OnlyFans membership to your favorite bear. Because on this Discord, we have a lot of bears. There's also a great form check section, where no matter what kind of lift you're doing, post a video, tons of people give you great feedback. Or maybe you're doing your own programming like down here. Well, there's a great section on the elitefts Discord where you can upload your programming, people can look at it, give you feedback, and telling you that maxing out 5 days a week makes about as much sense as not wiping after a massive Taco Bell dump. You gotta wipe. There's a button you can click, there's monthly prizes, you can win things like apparel with shirts, bands, all kinds of bands, endless amounts of bands.
Core values.
Yep, so we're back about core values.
Yeah, man. So this really became something in my life that I thought about. I had a really tough time in my life, entirely of my own doing. From about 2008, 2009, maybe into 2010, I was in a pretty good system of self-destructive behavior, unfaithful to my wife, and just whatever. Imagine it. That was kind of what I was doing. And I'd never thought about my core values. I was raised, I have great parents, loved each other, raised us well, modeled it well. And, I just went through a time in my life where I was making terrible choices. And so I think you can look at your actions. A lot of times you can look at anybody's actions, and you can start to identify what their core values are based on what their actions are. I mean, you can say what you want. I think a lot of businesses either never think about their core values, or corporations are notorious for printing core values up on a poster on the wall, and the employees don't know it, and it doesn't drive the actions of the business. And for us at Barbell Logic, and because Barbell Logic started in 2016 after this time period, and so I'd had some time to think about like who I really was and who I wanted to be. And so coming out of that, thankfully, my wife and I worked through it. She's a wonderful human being. She was, just been loyal, and a marriage that I probably would have never had we. I think that's always better coming from her than me, being the person that had to go through that and was sort of the victim of that stuff. And so, so my core values in 2008, 2009, 2010. I had a lot of like superhero mentality, a lot of narcissism, a lot of like, that's just, it had just been, it just got out of control. And in the aftermath of all of that, I was very, you've kind of alluded, I was a religious studies major, theology. I'm a Christian guy, and I try not to force that down anybody's throat at all. But I thought a lot about my legacy and like who I wanted to be when I was 85 or whatever. And I was nowhere near that. And so as time went on, and it took several years to really start to think about my core values and who I actually was. Because I don't think you can be like a super introverted person and you decide that one of your core values is to be super extroverted. It's just not who you are, right? You can't. So you really have to look at who you are and who you want to be. And the core values is kind of bridges the gap between those two things. That's what you're working towards. And again, that all still comes back to the previous discussion we had of like the pursuit of the goal, the pursuit of the guy I want to be at 85. Is actually where the joy is found. We'll look back with nostalgia and joy. And we even look back with nostalgia and joy even over those hard times because of the way they refined us. But in that process, I started to think about what are the things that really matter to me in my life and that I teach my kids as we homeschool your kids. I remember having a conversation with my wife when we made the decision to homeschool the kids. We were staying at a little hotel in Dallas, and I said, hey, we've been professional teachers. We can homeschool our kids. We can travel all we want. We can travel during school time, so it's cheaper to travel. We can go to Disney World if we want to when nobody else is there, whatever the thing is. But I said, but we can teach our kids anything we want. We're going to teach them all the normal stuff too, right? We're not an unschooling family. But, nobody ever taught me about debt or finances or how to treat my wife, a woman, anything like that. And, excuse me, sorry. And got that Zen burn back in my throat. And so we were able to start thinking about, and we made a list that night of the things that we want to teach our kids. And yes, of course, an accurate understanding of history, math, science, all those things are there, but also these things. Also, how to handle your finances, how to balance a checkbook, how to not go into $100,000 in student debt, things that no one ever taught me, how to be affectionate as a man towards my wife, which doesn't come naturally, doesn't for most of us. And so I started to think about like, what are the things that really drive my actions as I was several years out of this time period in my life. And so living a life worthy of my faith was important to me for sure. But also someone who deeply loved my wife and children and the people that were close to me and around me. I wanted to be an excellent leader. I mean, I was a business owner already. I'm very heavy in personal responsibility. So these are attributes. I wouldn't call these core values yet. These are the things that make up. So as people are listening to this, what I talk about in the book is that the easiest way to do this, in my opinion, is you just take your phone and just be intentional about thinking about what are the things that matter to you, right? We're going to strive to be the best at everything we do. We're always going to choose right, even if it doesn't benefit us or the bottom line of the business. Like those things are these are the attributes. And so a never-ending pursuit of knowledge and turning that knowledge into wisdom and then actually teaching it to other people. I've learned so much from you over the years, the same sort of thing. And also bringing a professionalism and a class to the fitness industry, which I think doesn't have much of that. And so when I started to look at those attributes, so what I would do is for the listeners, you take your phone, take 2 or 3, 4 days, and just write down the things that matter to you. Like, this is important, this is important. Don't worry about the order, don't worry about prioritizing, just bullet points, get the thing. And then you start to look at that list, and maybe you've got 15 things on that list. And shapes and patterns will start to emerge. You'll start to see these things that can be chunked together. And for me, I started to see I have personal and internal values. Like these things are personal really only to me, and they're who I am when no one's looking. And that's, that's that personal integrity and faith and that sort of stuff. Then I have relational values, how I treat other people like that are close to me, how I actually choose the voluntary hardship to build the marriage or build the fatherhood or the relationship with my daughters or whoever, my closest friends. And then for me, because of the business that I run, I have very service-driven values, how we serve. For people who don't know me well, for people who are listening to this podcast, I hope that I'm remembered when I'm 85 and hopefully the wise, jacked grandpa, which is who I would like to be. But they'll remember me as like, that guy had great customer service and he cared about people. So those are my core values. And so out of that, I can build statements out of those things. But the outflowing of that, of personal integrity and personal responsibility, those internal values, relational values, and service values, very quickly, you can see it so easily in Barbell Logic's core values. It flows as a natural outflowing because in the beginning, you're the founder, but you're also the only employee. So it is the value of the business. And then as you hire that first employee, often that first employee knows you. I mean, usually that's the way this works. You typically don't hire your first 5 hires, 10 hires aren't strangers. They're people that know. So they're people that probably align with your core values. Maybe not all of them. Maybe they don't agree with you religiously or politically or whatever. But in general, that whole like personal responsibility, focused on service, professionalism, class, things like that, that has continued to be an outpouring of what we do at Barbell Logic. And one of the things I love that my COO says, and I think it's important that it's from him. So imagine engineer of engineers, right? Just pure logical thinker. He's a great people person too, but a pure logical thinker. Worked in massive multi-billion-dollar corporations. So I've never worked anywhere where the core values drive our actions and our decisions every single day the way it does here. And that's because it was intentional from the very beginning. That's what it is. That's important to us. It's important to me. Maybe a core value is that my core values continue to extend. I want to be proud of what we do at Barbell Logic. I'm never going to sell out, right? Like we're not going to do that. That doesn't mean I'm never going to sell it. But that means I'm never going to sell out. and so I think that naturally, and I think you can see that here. I think anybody that knows a founder and an owner and knows a business collectively will see the outpouring. And I think you even see that, like you can look at Amazon and still see Jeff Bezos's footprint or fingerprint on it, even though he's not even in Amazon anymore. I mean, I think he's on the board, but like he doesn't work at Amazon, right? And so you don't realize how important the core values are to set in the early days and then to really live by those things. And so that's what we do. And we live by them. And those core values drive our goals for the business, like actual quantifiable goals, things that we're trying to do quarterly or yearly. And then we build underneath those goals actions that support the goals. And then we have metrics or PRs, like what we would call PRs, that measure the progress. And so we have goals, actions, metrics, and then how we execute that. We call that the game plan. And that's like the strategic plan of priorities that we do in the trenches in the business. But all of that stems back to the business core values, which is an outflowing of my core values. So that's where that came from.
The way this was presented to me was when with the E-Myth, I didn't read the book. Well, I did, but
it's amazing that the guy I heard about the E-Myth from didn't actually. Oh, you took the class.
I took the class, so
you got a deeper dive.
Yeah, it was like a 4-year course.
Okay, so yeah, right.
The one of the first activities that we did was setting a primary aim, and the coach I was working with the time was, before we could, because that's hard. Like, what is going to be the primary aim, of a company? Sure. And the company's just my way to pay for powerlifting at the time, and it was not even profitable. So what is even that? So that took several. That was supposed to be done in a month. It took like 2 months went by, and I still don't have an answer to that. And it's not without. I was thinking.
Sure. You weren't being lazy.
I wasn't being lazy. I was
hard.
trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And then what she asked me to do was to write my core values. And I'm like, I don't know, where do I even start with that? And the activity she had me do was to go back and think of, 10 people, statements, or movie characters, book characters, whatever it was, that had an influence on my life before I was out of high school.
Yep.
Right. That was simple.
Yeah.
It was like,
I like this person for this reason. Yeah.
And then write down what they said.
Yep.
And then the second part of that was write down 10 instances that just infuriated me, just upset me, like to no end. And then after those,
And probably what they said and why
and what
it
they
pissed you.
said,
Yeah, right.
yeah. So then the next call that we had, we do a Google search for a list of core values, and we were able to assign,
Yeah, that's cool.
core values to each one of those things, with the philosophy of being most of our core values are established before we're even X age.
Yeah, sure.
Junior high or whatever.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
gonna be.
for sure.
And so those are already ingrained.
Yep.
That doesn't mean others can't be added,
Right.
but those are ingrained. So the things that upset me were violations of the core value.
That's right.
And the things that inspired me were leaning into those core values. So then it was just a matter of then over a period of time, how do you take that from me to we?
Yep.
Because now it has to
So
apply across. And then over a longer period of time, how do you take it from 10 things to 3?
Yep.
Something that's a little bit more tangible. And then with that, over all the adversity and all the things that I've had, there's been so many times where you don't know what to do, but then I just look at that list.
Who are we?
And I know
Sure.
what to do.
Yep.
I may not want to do
Yep.
it, but I know what to do.
Right.
And the answer's right there.
Yep.
And it's like that.
Yeah,
so
the
it's,
right answer is not right because it's right. It's right because it's in alignment with your core values.
yes. And all that came before structuring any systems.
Yep.
Because how do
Absolutely.
you structure a system if there's no values
That's
that
right.
are actually behind that system?
Yep.
And I've had hundreds of people kind of go through that same thing, for whatever periods of their life that they're in. They're just going through crap or whatever it
Yeah.
is, and they don't know what to do. And it's like, just do this.
Yep.
And if you just do this and be thoughtful about it,
Yep.
you'll know what to do.
Yep.
You may not want to,
Right.
and that becomes another level of hard that's kind of beyond this voluntary hard.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Because to do something that you know is the right thing to do that may bring debt.
Yeah.
It may
May
not
not be the best for you or the bottom line. Or
yeah,
the
you can go
company
the
or-
other direction,
Yep.
and then there's more money.
Yep.
And those are tough.
Yeah.
You
But I'd say they're still voluntary. You still have to
Yeah.
make that decision, right? So we've both, I'm sure, had scores of times we had the opportunity to legitimately sell out, to be somebody we weren't, right? Not to sell the company for money, but to turn the company into something that it wasn't ever supposed to be. And, I've heard you say lots of times, Elite FTS is a content company that sells, that happens to sell equipment, right? And we're similar. I mean, we help people improve their quality of life by experiencing strength. Strength is the mode, but it's not the value. And I think, again, there's a lot of people, I've seen strength training and training in general improve many people's lives, but I've also seen it not, right? I've also seen people that train, they're just complete and utter douchebags. And so training alone isn't the thing that does the thing. It's a mode. It's just a symptom of, do you have this aligned to your core values, right? And for me, it's the other reason why I think I probably came out of the time period I did from 08 to 10. You talked about the core values being established from a young age. All these core values were still deep inside me. The roots were there. And that's why I was so miserable, because I was living a life that wasn't in alignment with my core values. It wasn't just the business. It was that my life wasn't. And so, I think if I, whatever that was, women or conquest or drugs or alcohol or whatever the thing was, if I didn't have the values that I did, I think I might still be in that. But because those values are set, like you said, by the time you're 12, 13 years old, there was this constant pull, like deep in my gut, that kept trying to bring me back to who I really was supposed to be and who I really was deep down inside. But my actions showed opposite. And I can remember talking through this and counseling too. And that same counselor I was telling you about a minute ago, I was just like, I don't understand why I did this stuff when I don't really want to do that stuff. And she said, oh, you wanted to do the stuff. Like your actions showed you did. You can say whatever you want to. And maybe your values don't line up with that, but your actions did. Like you wanted to do the thing. And so when we have to make a hard choice, a voluntarily hard choice in the business, which happens at this point, at the size of our business, size of yours, weekly, if not daily, we choose what's in alignment with the core value. And when we do that, it doesn't just flow. You talked about from me to we. It doesn't just flow from you to your executive team, to all your employees and all your staff. If you do it well, and I think you've done it well, it flows out to the entire community of people who are consuming the content. Your content consumers, the people who have read the articles and the training logs and watched the podcasts all these years, I promise you they can get real close on what your core values are. Right. And they could do the same thing for me. We've been on thousands and thousands of hours of podcasts. We've done the same thing with writing articles. Like, you can't fake it that long. And that's the other piece. And that's the reason why I've been so transparent, and you've done the same. You're the same when you were on my podcast. It's just like, I would rather not have the skeletons in the closet. I would rather just come out and be like, look at what a mess I was. Then later somebody else come around and be like, oh, this thing, like, no, I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you the stuff. And so, because I certainly haven't always made the right decision. But in the business, we collectively, daily, try to make decisions that are in alignment with our core values. And that's actually much easier now to have an executive team and a leadership team that's fully behind those core values, so that when I have my head up my hind end and start to get ready to make a decision that isn't in line with the core values, my team says, hey, that's not who we are. And I go, you're right. That's not who we are, right? And then I thank them and we make the right decision.
Well, I think that's it's an important point, because these values are on a spectrum.
Yep, for sure.
Right. So you're gonna move too far one way or the other way, and that's fine. That's normal.
Yep.
But then it needs to be kind of brought back in there with the training side of all that, is because we've both seen people that the training will destroy them. So the advice I have there is be careful of what you let become your identity.
That's right.
Right. Because if it's just singularly focused, your identity is being the strongest in the weight room you can absolutely be. And I fell into that. Then everything else, falls from that.
And when it goes away, what do you do?
Well, you're screwed,
you won't
but you
always
don't
be
have
the strongest.
Yeah. You don't have any other identity that's
right.
associated with that. Right.
Yep.
So, that identity needs to, in a way, be balanced. It doesn't mean you're going to be a less effective competitor or lifter.
Sure.
Actually, I would argue you're going to be better.
Yep.
Because there's going to be less stress.
That's right.
Across your entire life.
Sure.
To be able to recover better from what you're doing. But people like to be all in on the things that they just want to be all in on.
Yep.
Which is convenient.
Yep.
Because the better they get in business or whatever it is over a period of time, they realize they really weren't all in.
Right.
Right. That's because, all in encompasses a lot of different avatars that you have to play throughout your life.
Yeah, you would say if my whole life was Barbell Logic, then I would never spend time with my kids. I wouldn't go do anything else. I wouldn't spend time with my wife. I wouldn't, go to my church. I would just do business. But thinking that was going to make me a better business owner, but it probably wouldn't. Mm-hmm. It's the balance that actually brings the success often, and it's that consistent pursuit of voluntary hardship and the things that actually matter, that align with your core values, that make the biggest difference. And what we're trying to look for, coming back to that minimum effective dose, the way we even program in the gym, we're constantly looking at. We want to try to find the thing that's like the least thing that we can change, the smallest step we can change, that moves the needle the most. And that's hard. I mean, it's hard figuring that out, obviously. But that's why if you're going to start spending money on advertising on Facebook or something, you don't spend $40,000 the first month, right? You spend $1,000 or $100 or $40 or whatever. And let's say you spend $20 and you get $40 out of it. Well, okay, so it netted you $20. Or did it double? Or did it exponent? Did it square? Like, I don't know. Well, let's go to $60. Now, if you spend $60 and you make $80, then it made you only $20, law of diminishing returns. Mm-hmm. But if you made $120, okay, it doubled. But if you made whatever, 6 times 360, whatever it is, now it's exponential, right? 3,600, exponential. And so now that's how to use the minimum effective dose to keep trying to find where is that law of diminishing returns kick in. So I'm going to keep making this step in alignment with my core values, one little step at a time, changing one variable, which is my other thing with programming. The way guys program hop, they do a novice linear progression or something, and then it stops working because it does at some point. And especially when we were kids, and you just go to Muscle and Fitness or Flex Magazine, you pull a new program out that looked nothing like the previous program. Well, if the new program works, you don't know why it worked. And if the new program doesn't work, you don't know why it didn't work, because you changed every variable. Mm-hmm. You changed every lift, you changed the intensity, you changed the volume, you changed the frequency, you changed everything. So the way we adapted that to programming and minimum effective dose is we're going to linear progress. Almost every newbie is going to just do a basic linear progression till it stops working. And then we're just changing one variable. We're just going to change intensity or volume or frequency. And often intensity and volume have an inverse relationship, obviously, with each other. As the volume goes up, the intensity has to come down. But what I'm not going to do is change the intensity and the volume and the frequency and the exercise selection all at the same time. Because if that's not the scientific method. Scientific method is I control all of the variables except for one, and I change one variable and I look at the ROI. And if that one variable made a positive ROI, I continue to stick with that variable until I get the law of diminishing returns. And then I change another variable. But at no point do I just completely throw out the program and do a new program. Now, I say that occasionally somebody gets really tired of doing squats and deadlifts and they just want something fresh and new. But for the most part, it's that minimum effective dose for maximum return on investment step that can be applied to programming in the weight room, but it can be applied to business. It can be applied to life. It can be applied to in any of those things.
Well, it's all the same because if in the training you have, you know, your 4, like squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press, and there's also others, you know, like a barbell row. I mean, there's basic compound movements that, let's say there's 8 or 10, you know, in my mind, they should be mastered before you really start branching off into the same movement pattern with different things.
That's right.
You know, and otherwise you're never going to master that movement pattern.
That's exactly right.
You know, and some of these are so fundamental. I mean, a barbell row, a cable row is, you know, it's across the board.
That's right.
And where some of the younger lifters are making mistakes is they're jumping around movement to movement to movement to movement. And they never learn.
They never master any of them.
How to feel any of them.
That's right.
You know, and it kind of goes back to that whole mastery thing. You're not going to feel your lats on a row when you first start doing it.
Right.
You're just going to move it as effectively as you can move it, or your coach has you move it. But there's a time, you know, where
the light bulb goes off.
Yeah, now it's like, oh, okay.
Yep.
And that takes sessions and sessions and reps and reps. That's the point to where now you can branch it off into something else. And or if you just can never feel it in that movement, then you do a different movement.
That's right.
It's kind of simple, but in business would be the same thing. You can't, you know, start a business then throw in 75 movements.
Yep.
You're never going to figure any of them out.
Minimum effective dose. Yeah. And I think about my journey there where it was like, okay, I started as an athlete, a sports athlete, probably never mastered that because I wasn't great at any of them, but I loved them. And then I became a lifter. And I want to be careful with the word mastery because there were always guys, you know, but I relatively mastered lifting, you know, became a pro strongman, an elite level powerlifter in 4 different weight classes. So it's moderate. And then I set my eyes on mastering coaching. I think it'd be real hard to be a master lifting coach having never lifted. I don't even think it's possible. You know, occasionally you see this in football. It's weird. You see the guy that's never played football. It's a good football coach. It's a weird. Anyway, so then you master coaching, and then I'm like, well, maybe I should open a coaching business, and I'm going to learn how to run that by myself, and then I'm going to learn how to hire employees, and then I'm going to learn how to be a CEO and not have to micromanage and write the systems, and so. All of that is just a continuum. It's just a spectrum that you're on as you grow from one thing to the next. And you can literally take that down as small as you want to, down to, okay, I've mastered the squat and conventional deadlift, to now, okay, I can start to do sumo deadlifts, or I can start to do box squats, or I can start to do whatever. Or as big as playing sports and learning competitiveness and teamwork and all that kind of stuff, I can draw the line. I can see the ribbon that ties that all the way down to an 8-figure business and a CEO. That they're all interconnected. And without one, you know, each domino is a domino that falls. You pull that domino, those first 3 dominoes fall. Number 5 doesn't because you just yanked number 4. This is all just a ribbon that binds together.
Well, I think that's one of the most interesting things that I've had with just doing this podcast is I can go through somebody's timeline and see how each thing builds on the next. Yep. And I think that, you know, for the listeners, that they need to do that with people that they look up to. I don't think you should look up to anybody, but for lack of a better statement of that, you know, and look at the timeline, you know, and go through that and see how that built upon, because nobody just falls into a certain thing at a high level on accident.
Yep.
You know, it doesn't work that way.
Nope. It always takes time. Even the ones that seem like they exploded overnight, there is no overnight success. Even the one that might have gone from and again, I hate that we rank it this way with social media world, from, 100 followers to 1 million followers in a relatively short period of time. A guy like an Alex Hormozy or something that just exploded over the last couple of years. That guy's been working for 20 years doing this.
Yeah, I was going to say, look at the whole story.
There is no overnight success.
Yeah.
The guy's been doing it for 20 years. It just, at some point you hit critical mass and it grows. But like that, you don't get critical mass you don't go from 0 to 1 million. You go from 0 to 1. And then 1 to 2. And then people don't even take notice until it gets to 100,000 or something. So it's like, well, there was 18 years behind 0 to 100,000. And yeah, occasionally you hit viral something and you go from 100,000 to 1 million very quickly. But man, there was a lot of work that had to be done in the 18 years or 20 years or 30 years before that. And so, and this is where come back to the idea of being the 85-year-old man I want to be. The joy is not in the accomplishment of the goal. It's in the pursuit. It's in the pursuit of the goal, right? It's not when you hit 85 or if you set the world record power. I would love to have this on. You probably asked this question before. I would love to talk to some of these, like a Hoff or somebody and just be like, is the accomplishment of the goal, did the joy really last from the accomplishment of the goal, or was it really the pursuit of the goal? Because my guess is if you can give the vast majority of those truth serum, they would say it was actually in the pursuit. They'll look back later at enjoy. This is the difference between Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. I'm a huge fan of both those. I don't even watch sports. I haven't watched sports in years, but I used to love it. Daughters, right? So they don't care. But Michael Jordan worked harder than anyone who had ever worked in NBA ever. But he also got a greater return on his investment because he was extremely gifted. The guy went from, everybody knows the story, not making his high school basketball team as a sophomore. By the time he was a senior in high school, he's probably the best high school player in the country. That's a big ROI, right? But he also outworked everybody. But here's the thing about Jordan.
Well, there is a piece to that story that kind of gets left out. He was held back because he didn't hit a growth spurt. But anyhow, it doesn't change the narrative. Right.
The thing about Jordan is that Jordan, I really believe, wanted to win more than anyone who's ever lived in sports. He wanted to win. His work was actually for the accomplishment, right? And so everybody's, even if you're not a sports fan, and you can picture it right now, when he finally won that championship the first time, he's sitting on the locker room floor, he's crying, and he's holding that championship trophy, and his dad's next to him, and he's sobbing. They've finally got the Pistons off their backs, and they beat the Lakers, and they got the thing. I would love to ask him, how long did that joy last? Before you start thinking about next year's championship and working. Now, here's the difference between Jordan and Kobe. Kobe got joy from the work, completely divorced of the outcome. Did Kobe want to win? Yes, of course he did. Kobe outworked everybody who's ever been in the NBA, even more than Michael Jordan. Now, I will argue all day long that Jordan is the GOAT. He's the best basketball player of all time. But Jordan was much more gifted than Kobe was. But Kobe outworked everyone. Kobe found joy in the pursuit, in the process, divorce of the outcome. So that when he won the championship or when he didn't, he could still celebrate or not, but then he just got right back to work, right? My guess is that Jordan went out for 4 days straight, gambling and drinking. Yeah. After Kobe was in the gym the next morning, shooting free throws. That's the difference, right? And so it's understanding that when you see the ribbon, when you talk about my story or anybody else you have on this podcast, you see the ribbon that binds it all together from early childhood all the way to who they are now. The joy is in that story. It's not in the accomplishment, right? So I'd love to build a big, giant $100 million business and sell it one day and retire. And do I think if I do that, then all of a sudden all the joy that I want in life will be there because I accomplished the goal? No. I think I'll look back at that time and I'll think back with nostalgia and go remember those years that were just really, really good when we were growing and we'd come together as a company and we were still broke and sometimes we had a hard time making payroll. That's actually where it's at, man. That's life, because life is messy and it's hard and it's great and it's beautiful. And it's got all this stuff. That's where the joy is. It's not, and it's not we don't pursue PR. To get joy out of the pursuit, there still has to be a goal to chase. You still have to have the goal. We don't just do life with no goal. But recognizing that accomplishing the goal is not the thing that actually brings the long-term joy. That's a fleeting happiness that is great, and celebrate. You should enjoy the trophy, but then look back and go, man, it was all the work I put in to get there. That's where the good stuff is.
So how do you go from a side hustle to a full business? And the reason I put that out there now is I was listening to something the other day, just the nature of the economy, and more jobs are being created,
Yep.
but there's a little bit of a false narrative around that because
Yep.
a lot of those jobs are second jobs, you
Yep.
know, because people are can't pay their bills, so they got to
Sure.
get another job, so they have a side hustle to be able to kind of make ends meet with that. And you know, some of those want to build that side hustle into a full thing,
Yep.
which is basically what you did.
Yeah. So, and I hope what we're trying to help other coaches do with our, so Barbell Logic is the name of the company, but our software is called Turnkey Coach. And it literally is what it sounds. It's a turnkey. It's not just a programming platform. It's a complete like turnkey coach. And this is not to be a commercial for that, but the concept is there. It was built by coaches for coaches to be able to help them do this very thing. You're a whatever. You're a plumber. You're an accountant. You're, by the way, and I think those jobs are fantastic. As a matter of fact, if I had a son, I would be like, go be a plumber, HVAC, like whatever, electrician. Great job. Don't go to college and get $100,000 in debt. So, not talking down about it. But let's say you work any normal job, and you don't like it. Not a fan. What you really love is this like coaching thing, or name whatever other thing. But let's say it's coaching. Well, you got to go back to that 18 to 24 months. You got 18 to 24 months. Where you get to work 2 shifts. Shift 1 is the one that pays the bills, and shift 2 is the side gig. And you got to work your ass off at it. You got to outwork everybody. Again, work doesn't cost money. It costs energy and time. That's what it does. And so you've got to work efficiently and effectively. You work on the things that actually matter, and not drown in the urgency of working in the side hustle, but work also on, you got to do both, and you got to work in and on.
Well, non-distracted work.
That's right. Really important, dude.
Yes.
So again, we were, I think, I don't think we were recording. I love what's called the Pomodoro. I do, my whole team will measure output and how much work we got done by Pomodoros. Like how many Pomodoros did it take you? So Pomodoro is the original thing. It's from like the 80s. Remember the old kitchen timer when we were a kid? It was a tomato, right? And so everybody's got a timer on their phone now. But those old tomato kitchen timers that your grandma had, it looked like a tomato. Pomodoro is just the Italian word for tomato. And a guy did a study, and he found that most people can do excellent undistracted work for 25 minutes. Now, some people can do it for 30, 45 an hour, some 15, little kids, 7, whatever. But you set it in general for like 25 minutes, and you turn all the notifications off on your phone and all the notifications on your computer, and you have one task that you focus on. And I usually have a scrap of paper beside me. So if something pops into my head, like, oh, I got to thaw meat for dinner tonight, I just write thaw meat and I go right back to the thing. I don't actually get distracted from the thing. So my phone doesn't go off, my emails aren't, I've got everything my phone's on airplane mode, my computer's on airplane mode, whatever. And there's no distraction. And you just do this undistracted work for the thing that has to be done. I have mentored a ton of up and coming coaches in business that just need to sit down and write their first system, which I usually get them to like clean the gym, how to clean the gym. I'm like, you shouldn't be cleaning the gym. You're coaching a lot, hire somebody to clean the gym, but you got to have a system for that. You can't just hire somebody and go clean the gym. That doesn't work. So we got to have a system. Next month we do our call. Send me the system that you did on clean it. Well, I just got so busy. I just didn't write. Uh-oh. See, now we got a problem, right? And so the key is you've got about 18 to 24 months. You can work your ass off and you can do double shifts. And then this is the financial key. You don't spend $1 of the second job. Because if you're making 60 grand at the main job, and then you make 10 grand at the second job, and then 20, and then 30, and then 40, eventually you're making 120 grand, and you raised your lifestyle. And now to leave the old job, you've got to take a pay cut. Your pay's got to get cut in half again. So what you do is you take all the money from the second gig until it can replace the first gig, and then you leave the first gig. That's how you do it. And that takes an enormous amount of work, both in the business, developing the skill, developing the mastery, and the work on the business, of the systems, of the processes that you have to have in place, of standard operating procedures, all that stuff. Both of those have to be done. And you're on a time limit. 18 to 24 months. If you're grinding, like Andy Baker, like I used to do, like where you're working 4 a.m. to 9 p.m., you got a couple years you can do that. And after that, you're just like, screw this. I'm burnt out. I'm not doing it anymore. It's not going
I think the biggest takeaway from that is the undistracted work, because when I was building the business, I didn't have those distractions, right? I mean, you do the work.
Yeah.
You know, there's no Facebook. I mean, there's none of these other things to be able to do that. So it's just focus on this work, stop, now do this work, go back to this work, and just plow through it. Where today, in an attention economy, you know, there's distractions all over the place.
Built to do it.
Yeah, and we're giving them part of the distraction.
Yep.
You know, so we're kind of contributing to the issue. But aside from that, that is the economy that we're in.
Yep.
You know, so that in itself has to be a skill set that they need to be able to work on as well.
For sure.
You know, so, but it has to be allocated time. So if you're trying to figure out how to grant or get more attention, watch people that have attention.
Sure.
But watch it with the eye.
Right. That I'm learning.
Of what are they doing?
That's right.
Like how did they segue into this topic? You know, how did this, like, what was that beyond just absorbing it, studying it? You know, it's a different eye, you know, to be able to look into. And if they can do that, then the 12 to 24 months for sure. If they can't do that and they let the distractions, then it's not going to work.
Right. That's right. And I tell
probably ever.
I tell people this all the time. Like, I actually think it is unbenevolent of me to, when I see someone who just doesn't have it in them to run a business, I have to tell them. I say it all the time. I say, hey man, this is probably not for you. You need to work for somebody else. You don't have the, you know, I've got people that I know, which, be careful the way I tell the story. They're just very unreliable. They don't show up on time. They don't get the work done. They can't focus and output. I mean, again, there was a interview with Warren Buffett and Bill Gates years ago, and they were asking these two guys, two of the richest guys in the world, like, what is the thing that really separates people success from unsuccessful? And both of them said the ability to focus and get shit done.
Yeah, I would put in there, and I'm not at their level, the ability to tolerate chaos.
Oh, for sure.
You know, and because that's probably the biggest thing is, you know, people will start businesses, but they don't have the ability to deal with chaos.
Yeah, and not just tolerate, but I would even say manage. I mean, there has to be
it. I mean, there's got to be a part of you that kind of loves it, even though it's horrible.
Yep.
You got to love that, and if you don't have that, then, you know, work for somebody else, and you can build a great life doing that. There's way more people doing that,
for sure. And way safer.
Oh my God, yes. And it can be far more successful, and can just, when they leave work.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of things I think that young entrepreneurs don't really grasp.
Sure.
You know, such as you never leave work, ever.
Right. The work is never done.
You know, 25 years, ever.
Yeah, right. And it's never done at the end of the day. I talk about this all the time. My family, my employees, and my leadership team knows. Every day you make a decision as a business owner when to stop working. And then you still think about the work, but where I actually close the laptop and I stop working, not because the work was done, right? I'm not mowing lawns. Like, at some point you mow the last lawn for the day, the lawn is mowed, the work is done, I get to go home, and I bet that person never thinks about mowing lawns. I envy that a little bit, right?
I envy that a lot.
Yeah, I know, right?
I'm not going to lie.
I get up I woke up at 3:30 this morning, no alarm, woke up at 3:30, which is 2:30 my time because I'm Central Time. And woke up and was like laying in bed. I was like, come on, you can go back to sleep. And I could just, nope, you can't, right? Get up, open up the computer, make the coffee, pop in the Zen. Here we go. Time to work. And so and guess where I started working? Where I left off last night. Because that's what being a business owner is. It's never done.
Is your whole network of staff online?
All my entire network of staff's online.
So how does that work?
We were lucky because we've been doing that since 2016, since way before COVID, when everyone else had to figure it out. So we've been doing the Zoom and again, it comes back to, I talked really briefly about that system, that kind of game plan system of goals, actions, metrics, execution. For me, I don't pay anybody hourly. You can't do that online. Like, I don't know how many hours you work. Like, and I'm certainly not going to sit there and have some sort of like parental thing on your computer so I can see how much you're actually on your computer doing work. We don't pay for time. We pay for output. We're an output-based company. Like, I don't care if you're a full-time employee, if you get your work done in 20 hours a week or 60 hours a week, it's the output you're getting paid for. It's the only way to do it online. And you just have to have really good systems and standard operating procedures in place. So people, obviously this is a theme of what I've talked about. Imagine why, because I never see my employees face to face. Matter of fact, I have my executive assistant is an hour outside of Columbus. We went and had dinner last night. I see him about twice a year. My executive assistant, who I talk to, text, email, DM on Basecamp numerous times every single day, but I never get to look him in the eye and say anything, unless it's on Zoom, which doesn't count, right? So you just have to have great systems in place. We get up every day and everybody knows what they're supposed to do for the week. And at the end of the week, we do a quick weekly report. They're weekly reports. It's not TPS reports. It's not like, it's not Office Space. It's like, if 5 minutes, if you can't tell me what got accomplished this week, then the report was too long. And then I take a culmination of those on Sunday morning. I get up on Sunday morning, sit down and take all of those, the 5 major areas of the company, and I put those in a single succinct report. And it's an all hands report, and I put it in draft form and I hold it because I'm not going to send it on a Sunday. As a matter of fact, I used to do that, and now my Nikki Sims, my CXO, would get me in trouble. And so I get up Monday morning, boom, hit send. Now everyone knows what we accomplished last week and what we're going to accomplish this week, and how that fits into the bigger model of what we're trying to accomplish this month, and how that fits in the bigger model of what we're trying to accomplish this year. And then we meet as a mission control team. So my top 4 executives meet twice a year in person for about a week. Either come to Springfield or go somewhere and travel and get a big Airbnb and work for a solid week. We set strategy, what we call strategy deployment, every 6 months for the year. So we did that in January for the whole year of 2024. In June, we'll do it again, and we'll look at how much do we need to course correct. I still got 6 months of 2024, and now we're going to talk about the plan for 2025, the first 2 quarters of 2025. And then that drives the yearly game plan, the goals, actions, metrics, which drives the monthly game plans, which are divided up by different teams, right? Different types of teams, like the content marketing sales team, or the operations and dev team, or the CX team, or whatever that is, finance team. And so that's how we get it done. And when you focus on output, which still comes back to undistracted work, then you output a lot. And I think one of the things that we do well, and our ability to scale, is because we are an extremely high output company. I would be very surprised if there's anyone who's quiet quitting at my if you heard that, right? There's they've taken on 4 online jobs and they're doing the bare minimum at all of them. And if they get fired from one, they still have 3 jobs. And they're making $75,000 at all of them. It's pretty good financial commitment, but again, back to core values, that's real shitty. And so we're an output-based company.
Were there any topics that you wanted to cover I didn't bring up?
No, I don't think so. I check really fast on I'll give a CTA at the end of where to send people if you ask me that.
Oh yeah, I will definitely ask you that. The pursuit of hard things.
I think we got most of the big stuff.
How do you define success?
Did I put that in there as a question?
Yes, you did.
Jesus. Okay, ask me again.
How do you define success?
Dave asked me a question that evidently someone on my staff sent you. That now I'm not ready for. I think living a value-driven life that's in line with your core values. That's it. It's certainly not money. And don't get me wrong, it's nice to be able to pay the bills, not worry about keeping the lights on. That part's great. But ultimately, if you're not really intentional and thoughtful about who you want to be and what your core values are, and the actions that you're doing aren't driving that, I don't think you're successful, right? And so I think there are lots of billionaires. As a matter of fact, I saw a thing on Twitter the other day of, can someone find me a billionaire who's over 35 or maybe over 40, and there were 3 things, who's still on their first marriage, whose kids love them, or are well-adjusted, and there was one other thing. No one could come up with one. They've all been divorced. They've all got kids that hate them, or or whatever. That somehow, so getting to that height of a billionaire, certainly, my guess is that most of those guys would say, I would rather have some of that stuff back, and would happily pay for it. You go to Warren Buffett, the guy's whatever he is, 94 years old. If you could ask Warren Buffett, how much of your wealth would you give up to go back to being 28? Answer is all of it. because time is the finite piece, right? And so I want to live a life that is value driven for the vast majority of life, so that when I'm 85, not that I've arrived, but at 85, I look back and I go, I lived a life well lived, like that was in line with my core values. Whether the business succeeds, whether the business fails and we go bankrupt, like whatever those things, I don't think those things have anything to do with success. I think living a life in line with your values, like being a value driven person and for me as an owner of value driven business that's success. And so not everybody's going to look at business the same way I do. Certainly a lot of people aren't going to want a business this big. But I think when you can live a life that's in line with your core values, I think that's, and pass that on, I hope, to your kids and your spouse and the people that you're closest to. I mean, that's really what I'm trying to do.
One of the things I put a lot of thought into, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, was legacy, where there was a time in my life where I was like really concerned about that. And then the more I thought about it and the more years that have gone by, the more that I don't care about it at all, because 5 years after I'm gone, nobody's going to know, right? And 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, nobody's going to know it all. I mean, people forget real fast. And even if you make a big imprint, on the earth, what are the odds that
pretty low
you're going to be that, so it's, I kind of started to reframe that in my own head, that's chasing this false narrative that's not even true.
Sure. That
really doesn't matter. But what matters is if there is a legacy, it would be in whatever I can give my children.
That's right.
Because they'll pass that. Those values, they'll pass on. And so where with what you were speaking about with those guys is that legitimately is where those values can be passed for generations.
If you do it well.
Wealth doesn't get passed. Well, Rockefeller, I suppose.
Right. There's a few.
Most people, generational wealth really doesn't work for very long.
Three generations.
Yeah. So three generations. So even that, is kind of a false pursuit.
Right.
And if you can, be on your deathbed and look back and have memories that are worth memorying, then that's worth it. And that's where, because a decade ago, whatever, legacy was like a big thing that everybody was talking about. It was like a CTA, that people were kind of pushing all over the place, which kind of led to all that. And, I've had people in my life that have passed that have been very well known, and it's, years go by, they're not so well known anymore.
That's right.
Now things that they've done, maybe things that they've contributed, Louis, for instance. 10 years from now, people will still kind of know Louis, but what they're going to know are the principles that he popularized.
That's right. And the guys that moved, and comes back to what you said about the kids. My job, and this is another great way to say success, is it's my job to move the ball down the field. Right. So I come from I don't even know how long, but a long line of Ozarkians, people from the Ozarks, which is obviously notoriously a poor, hillbilly, uneducated sort of area. It's a great show. Great show. We don't have a lot of, there's not a big drug cartel, but it's very entertaining. But, my parents, I had very good grandparents, and they moved the ball down the field, but they were very poor and uneducated. My dad was very educated, but again, I'm son of a poor Baptist preacher's kid, but they really raised us well, and they moved the ball down the field. And then my dad was actually an engineer later in life, and they did better with finances and stuff. So both financially, but also with core values, moved the ball down the field. I think my generation, my brother, my sister, and I, we've continued to move the ball down the field. My goal is to prepare my children to move the ball down the field. I don't want them going backwards 20 yards, but not just them. I'm playing the long game, man. I'm not even thinking even just about my children. It's my future grandchildren, who I don't have yet, and great grandchildren. Not so they remember, great grandpa Matt was this, but because the values that I set in place in the family got carried out. And it'll be the same thing with Louis. 30 years from now, like Louis is popular enough that people will be able to read about him in the annals of strength history. But the reality is, it's the guys even like you and just other guys, the Matt Winnings and stuff that are taking what Louis did to obviously far advanced strength training down the field in the United States especially. And they picked up the ball, you guys have picked up the ball, and you moved it down the field. And if you do this well, at least in this world, you will pass that down to others who will do that. And again, to me, that's a pretty good example of success, right? I moved the ball down the field, and then I gave others the opportunity to do the same, and they did.
Yeah.
So
Where can people find you?
I knew you were going to ask me this. Can I look this up really fast? I haven't actually. Well, I know where to find me. It's the CTA. Sorry. It's the CTA. It's the CTA. Sorry. I think I know it, but I just want to make sure. Okay. Yep. All right. Ask me that again.
Where can people find you?
Obviously, Barbell Logic. We're Barbell Logic everything online. So barbell-logic.com. We're Barbell Logic on all the social medias, all that fun stuff. We got a great YouTube channel. We've put out a ton because we're a service very similar to you. So you're a content company that sells equipment. We're a service company that gives out all of our content for free. We make a tremendous amount of content. So we've got tons of YouTube videos. I was joking with you before the show. I think the most popular wrist straps and wrist wraps video on YouTube is me, but with your equipment, with my favorite Elite FTS orange rubber straps and my black and white wrist wraps. And so we have, you can look up how to anything on YouTube in strength training, how to do any movement. We have a long form version, which is usually 7 minutes long, so still pretty short. And we also have an entire series that we call gym shorts, kind of play on the, that's under 60 seconds. Count a box squat in under 60 seconds or whatever, which is really hard to teach in under 60 seconds, but it's on the app. And so that's a great place to go. And then for those of you who are listening who are coaches or are considering coaching or getting into coaching or taking this like part-time gig and making it your full-time gig, the best place to go is turnkey.coach. And you can go to turnkey.coach/5x. We have an entire course there. It's totally free. You don't have to put your email in. There is no like, what's in it for us? What's in it for us is if we can make more people good coaches, we change more people's lives to experience strength. Great, right? Now, some of those people will end up, licensing out the software from us. That's fine. That's not but the point there is turnkey.coach. You can actually, and for me, it's about changing a paradigm shift between with AI coming, which is going to make those of you who are selling programs out of business in the next couple of years. So you either have to have a very efficient in-person business like Andy Baker does, or a very efficient online business. And when I say efficient, what I really mean is you better provide a level of service and relationship and trust that AI cannot provide. The thing that AI cannot replace is the human. And so people are going to want more human relationship. So if you can do that, and Turnkey Coach helps coaches do that, that's a great place to go. And so you better be thinking about, don't be the steel industry of the 70s. You go like, life's going to change. Like the entirety of the world's knowledge is now in our pocket, in our cell phone. And now we have a language learning model who's going to be able to take everything that Louis ever said, and it's going to flat out lay everything out in 1,000 words and 5,000 words and whatever the thing is. And so it'll write the programs and give me a conjugate program that Louis would have written in 1997. Boom, done. It's going to do it. So if you're selling that, your business is going to come to an end soon. So you better either figure out how to do it well in person or really well online, which is much more than selling programs. It's interacting with your clients. It's breaking down technique. It's giving them that support. Turnkey Coach allows you to do both. Like you can do both the in-person really effectively and the online side, which is what guys like Andy do so well. So yeah, so that's it.
Any final thoughts?
Man, it's just been an honor. I'm sure we have, I'm sure some overlap in our listeners, but you made a huge impact on my life. And so I'm really grateful to be able to be here. I would not have gotten into powerlifting without finding you and reading you. And I think I told you when you were on my podcast that finding those early articles that you wrote and Deep Squatter and the training logs on the old site and all that stuff that's what got me into powerlifting. And if I hadn't gotten into powerlifting, I wouldn't have competed in powerlifting. If I hadn't competed in powerlifting, I wouldn't have been a strongman. If I wasn't a strongman, I wouldn't have opened a gym. If I hadn't opened a gym, there'd be no Barbell Logic. And so, I appreciate you said last time to me when I said that to you, you said, I think you would have figured it out even without me. And I appreciate the humbleness in that. But the reality is that I put a lot of gravity on those things. And that's why I can speak about people like Mark Ripito, who sued me with still some amount of nostalgia and loyalty. And like, I just learned a ton from him, even though our relationship ended poorly. There's a lot of gravity there. Like I learned a lot from that guy. I learned a lot from Glenn Penley, God rest his soul, and from you and from Louis. And so like those things mattered, and they have deeply affected the way I run my business. And so thank you. It's a huge honor. I've never been here, haven't got to see the gym. And so it's, Columbus isn't an honor. Don't get me wrong. So coming to Ohio, no. No, it's been great. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming out. And guys, thank you. And we're done. Hey guys, real quick, we realized that something ridiculous, like 80% of the people that watch the podcast don't subscribe. So subscribe to the channel and make sure to check out the description for more details on the guest, links to their pages, and give us a few days, but the show notes will be there. Or not the show notes, the timestamps. Hey, we're just rolling with this thing right now. Hey guys, if you like and want to support the podcast, remember we have limited edition items. These items can range anywhere from t-shirts, tank tops, sweatshirts, cups. You never know what you're going to get. Check them out at www.elitefts.com.
Why should anyone join this Discord? Why wouldn't you want to? It's not fake, it's genuine, it's authentic. It's well worth it. The Discord has been nothing short of meeting new people who are incredibly like-minded, giving each other a bunch of ball busting, but also being there to support each other whenever life throws their way. The best part of it for me has also been able to connect with lifters of all levels, help coach, get coached, and also connect with other new fathers who are enjoying the journey of lifting and trying to balance that out. It's the glue that holds all of us together. A common interest will bring people from different walks of life, people who are multimillionaires, these characters and everything else in between, united under one thing, the pursuit of strength.
I think most of us would agree that getting a coach is a great step forward that an athlete can make to make greater progress. But what if you had two coaches? What if you had a whole bunch of coaches and a whole bunch of driven elite level athletes and like-minded people all in your corner trying to make you better? That's exactly what you're going to get with the Table Talk Discord crew.
All right, guys, thanks for watching the video to the end. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and click here, or here for more videos.